Beyond the Mage. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction. So don't try any techniques you hear here in real life, your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 1 Spells. The dark, cramped room contained 2 wooden beds, a wooden table that looked like it might fall apart at any moment, 2 relatively intact wooden chairs, and a dusty, stained stove. The only passageway in the room was narrow, barely wide enough to step through. A faint ray of light pierced through a small window in the south wall. Through the light, dust particles floated freely in the air like mayflies, adrift and unattached. In the flickering light, a thin boy could be seen lying on one of the slightly damp wooden beds. This boy, named Gouda in both his past and present lives, was using the dim light to survey the dusty, cramped room, smelling the faint musty odor in the air. Silence reigned all around. This didn't feel like a dwelling, it felt more like a claustrophobic prison. You mean I've been unconscious for almost a day? Gouda finally spoke, asking the boy who should have been his roommate. I thought you were dead. You scared me to death. The boy who answered was extremely thin. Gouda was already considered thin, but this boy was much thinner, looking malnourished and small, like an 8 or 9-year-old child. Of course, Gouda knew he was 13 years old. He was that age too. Although in his world, that age was considered childish, here, 13 was considered an adult. Why had himself been unconscious for almost a day? More accurately, how had himself died? It must have been because of himself's death that this boy had taken over his place. A very simple deduction. Unfortunately, Gouda couldn't remember anything about himself's death, not even where he was, what his current situation was, or the name of his roommate. But thankfully, he didn't remember nothing at all. His predecessor had left him with some memories. Some things that Gouda considered truly important were clearly etched in his mind, indelible. Perhaps for himself, the memories of this place were too painful, so when the other person took over, they didn't inherit them from him. In Gouda's view, this might actually be a good thing. If he had truly inherited all of his predecessor's memories, then who is he? Was he the predecessor, himself, or a new personality formed from the fusion of both? He didn't want his personality to change. The downside was that he urgently needed to understand his situation. Luckily, without him having to painstakingly probe, his roommate, Amy, had already begun to recount the events with lingering fear, without him even needing to ask. I knew this day would come. Although you're the only one among us who can independently concoct a basic spider venom potion, in Master Sada's eyes, it's nothing at all. At this point, Amy glanced at the expressionless Geode, seemingly afraid of displeasing him, and stammered, what I mean is, we're called apprentices, but everyone knows Master Sada doesn't treat us like human beings. We're just his human test subjects and free servants, so, Master Sada doesn't care about our abilities at all. Hearing this, Geode could probably guess how he had fainted. Keywords, drug testing. Amy, on the other hand, continued chattering, showing that Geode's previous fainting had indeed frightened him, and he needed to alleviate this negative emotion through talking. I'm telling you, I checked your breathing before. You were completely out of breath, no heartbeat, practically dead. How could you wake up like that? If you weren't still able to talk to me properly, I'd suspect you weren't human, but a ghost. Amy slapped her thigh, extremely excited about her roommate's resurrection. In a place like this, her companion was her pillar of support. And if God had died, it would probably be his turn to test the potion soon. Could it be that the potion concocted by the Mage Sada succeeded? Amy guessed. Thinking of this possibility, he became even more excited. Because if it really succeeded, the Mage Sada would be overjoyed, and they would definitely have a good time. Besides, maybe they wouldn't need to test the potion anymore? After all, the potion had already been successfully concocted. God wasn't as optimistic as Amy. He knew the truth. The potion concocted by the Mage Sada that Amy was talking about hadn't succeeded. It should be said that it successfully sent Amy's good roommate away. Gouda rubbed his still slightly aching temples, trying to concentrate and organize his thoughts. As a student in the mathematics department of Peking University, one of the top universities in China, He had been working on his graduation thesis in the school library day and night. Exhausted, he had taken a short nap at his desk. When he awoke, he was met with billowing smoke and a sea of crimson. Endless flames licked at him, giving him no chance to struggle. In a place like a library, once a fire breaks out, its momentum is unstoppable. Therefore, Gada's fate was sealed. Mathematicians are generally rational and don't believe in metaphysics. But the undeniable truth told Gada that his body was no longer his own, and rejuvenation was impossible. Time travel, such an extremely mystical thing, had indeed happened to him. With Amy's incessant chatter and his own occasional questions, in just half a day, Gada had grasped his current predicament. Orphans from the streets were taken in as apprentices by the sorcerer Seda and brought to this herb garden. They tended the herbs, prepared potions, assisted Seda, and served as human test subjects. Everyone in the garden, except for Seda, was an apprentice like Gada and Amy. The number of apprentices remained around 10 year-round, but this stability was dynamic. Every so often, Seda would take an apprentice away to test his newly concocted potions on humans. No one knew what potions Seda was trying to concoct, they only knew that he had always failed. And each time it failed, the apprentice would die on the spot, with no chance of survival. Whenever the number of apprentices in the garden fell below 5, Seda would go out and bring back a new batch of about 5 apprentices to maintain a stable number. As for the origins of the apprentices, they were mostly orphans like God. Why not try to escape, Gada? Sorting through his jumbled thoughts, asked Amy thoughtfully. Are you crazy? Amy exclaimed in surprise. Have you forgotten? Master Seda branded us with a tracking mark. No matter where we run, he can track us. If we don't run, we can survive. If we dare to escape, we're dead. Tracking mark. Gada's gaze sharpened, lost in thought. If time travel was metaphysics, then this world was the most metaphysical of all, a world where magic existed. Yes, magic. The magic in this world was not the superstitious methods of drawing talismans and chanting spells used by sorcerers, but truly magical transformations, a kind of heavenly power that could change things and reality through unscientific means. The tracking mark Amy mentioned was a kind of magic. A high-achieving student who had received compulsory education should have scoffed at this kind of mysterious power that only existed in novels and movies. And this deeply ingrained belief couldn't be broken by a few words from Amy. The reason Gada accepted the concept of magic so easily was simple. He licked his chapped lips and looked at the fireplace not far away. Without Gada making any move, the earthenware pot that had been hanging on the fireplace suddenly moved horizontally, until it reached above the wooden table that seemed on the verge of collapse. Then, it tilted slightly, and the scalding hot water flowed directly into a cup placed on the table. The pot then landed smoothly on the table, while the cup filled with hot water floated up and moved steadily towards Gada. Gada reached out, took the cup, and took a small sip to moisten his throat, which was parched from being unconscious for a day. Then, he let go, but the cup did not fall. As if it were free from gravity, it remained suspended in midair, moving back to the table at the same steady speed. Throughout the entire process, Gada did not make any movement except for glancing at the fireplace, and neither did Amy. There was no other person in the room. It was as if an invisible third party, or an unseen hand, had performed this simple action, pouring Gada a glass of water. In Gada's original world, this would have been an extremely terrifying event. But the two people in the room remained calm, as if this bizarre supernatural event was commonplace. Gada appeared composed on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. His predecessor had left him no memories of his daily life, but he had retained all the knowledge he possessed, including language, his understanding of the world, and most importantly, knowledge of magic and potion making. Knowledge is the most precious thing, no matter where you are. Therefore, Gada was incredibly grateful that his predecessor had left him with the truly important things. And the technique he had just used was one of only 2 tricks his predecessor possessed: Mage's hand alteration, zero ring. Within the casting range, a floating ghostly hand appears, persisting until the spell ends or is actively dispelled. If the ghost hand's distance exceeds 30 feet, 10 meters, or if the wizard's hand is cast again, the existing ghost hand will disappear. The wizard's hand can perform simple actions, such as manipulating an object, opening an unlocked door or container, or emptying the contents of a vial, but it cannot carry an object weighing more than 10 pounds, approximately 4.5 kilograms, or activate magical items. A trick that is insignificant to a wizard brought Goddard an indescribable shock. The wizard's hand, it's not even a spell, it can only be called a trick. This is a world with true power and truth, the power of law, the truth of technique, is, spell. Let me clarify a few points to avoid a constant arguments in the book review section that might spoil everyone's harmony and good mood. 1. Regarding precise amnesia. I don't know why so many people don't understand, real amnesia is just like this, only forgetting things, not forgetting one's literacy, skills, and understanding of the world. No one with amnesia would be unable to recognize a car or speak after going out too. Regarding scientific metaphysics, I'm too lazy to discuss it. 3. Mathematics major. I did have an undergraduate degree in mathematics, but not from Peking University. I don't have that kind of intelligence. However, this book isn't positioned as a genius novel, it's a traditional leveling up farming novel. 4. The author retains the final right of interpretation for all world settings. Don't try to apply the settings of other novels to this one, even the D&D settings have been heavily modified rather than directly used. 5. It features the characters Fengling Gaiwang, but it's not a system novel. 6. It's normal if you don't like this novel, but as long as you're a paying reader, I sincerely appreciate your support of legitimate novels. There are many excellent novels on Kidian, don't let any parts of this book that don't suit your taste affect your mood. 7. Initial subscriptions were 500, the current average subscriptions are 5,200. Please believe that I'm writing seriously and it's getting better with each chapter. Finally, I wish all paying readers good health and great wealth. 2025-1010. Chapter 2. Elon. Magic is indeed wondrous, inspiring endless longing and imagination, but Gauda had little time for contemplation or awe. The environment here was appalling, dark, decaying, poorly ventilated, and as silent as a tomb. He felt gloomy after only a short time. This was clearly not a place to linger. More importantly, he had been resurrected after testing medicine for the sorcerer Seda. Could this matter simply end there? Undoubtedly, the most urgent task was to escape this medicine garden. How? As Amy had said, these apprentices had been branded with a tracking mark on the very first day they were brought back by the sorcerer Seda. Without removing the tracking mark, there was no way to escape the sorcerer's clutches. Gauda slowly sat up, but instead of getting out of bed, he leaned against the wall, seriously considering ways to escape the sorcerer's control. With his current knowledge, he could only think of 2 methods. First, since there was a tracking mark, there must also be a spell to remove it. Second, if the problem can't be solved, then eliminate the person who created it, the Mage Seda. It sounds simple, but it's harder than climbing to heaven. At least for him right now. Magic is wondrous, and therefore incredibly precious. He, a mage apprentice with no background, treated like a little gray mouse, has only mastered 2 tricks so far, both from the Mage Seda. Where can he learn a spell to remove the tracking mark? Moreover, learning magic is incredibly difficult. Even if he did acquire the corresponding spell, he absolutely couldn't master it in a short time. As for eliminating the Mage Seda, that's practically impossible. The Mage Seda is a seasoned mage, possessing countless powerful spells. And he, on the other hand, only knows 2 tricks, both completely harmless. Gauda racked his brains, but couldn't come up with a solution to his current predicament. He pondered for a moment, about to ask Amy, who had just quieted down, something. Then, a noise came from outside. A series of hurried footsteps approached, and an apprentice, clearly much older than himself, knocked and entered. His steps quickened as he scanned the cramped room, his gaze lingering on Gaode, who was half reclining on the bed. Gaode, Master Seda heard you've woken up and wants you to see him now. Gaode's eyes narrowed slightly, his mind racing, but he clearly lacked the power to disobey Master Seda's command. He simply nodded and said, "Okay." Without hesitation, Gaode rose and followed the apprentice who had brought the news out of the room. Watching Gaode leave, Amy suddenly realized something. It seemed that Gaode was somewhat different after waking up. But he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Beyond the room was a long, narrow corridor. The corridor was curved, like a crescent moon, with doors spaced at regular intervals on both sides. On either side of each door was a candle, its faint light and warmth dispelling the darkness and chill of the corridor. Although his predecessor had lived here for nearly 2 years, this period of memory hadn't been retained by Gauda, so he was completely unfamiliar with the environment and was currently observing his surroundings discreetly. The apprentice who had come to deliver the message obviously didn't notice Gauda's subtle movements. In fact, in such a high-risk and oppressive environment, How could these apprentices have the mind to pay attention to others? So at least Gauda didn't have to worry about giving himself away or being noticed for being different from before. Having just arrived in this world, and before he could even catch his breath, he was about to face the mysterious and unpredictable Master Seda. It was impossible for Gauda not to feel pressured. As he followed the apprentice, he imagined the scene of his upcoming meeting with Master Seda. Just then, a door on the left suddenly opened, and a gloomy-looking young man walked out. Gauda didn't recognize him. But the young man seemed to recognize Gauda, standing coldly in front of Gauda's path, looking at him with a forced smile before Gauda could even speak. Gauda, looks like you're incredibly lucky. Even drug testing didn't kill you. Gauda frowned slightly, glanced at him, and turned to leave without a word. It wasn't that he was afraid of him, he simply didn't recognize the man, and engaging in conversation would only give him away. Besides, this man clearly came looking for trouble, so why bother with him? But just as Gauda was about to pass by, the man's shoulder slammed into him with considerable force, making Gauda feel as if he'd hit a wall, causing him to stumble back several steps before regaining his balance. What, Gauda? You've become so arrogant that you don't even bother to speak to me, the gloomy young man chuckled sarcastically. You don't actually think that just because you have some talent and can concoct a basic spider venom potion, you can impress the mage, do you? If the mage truly valued you, he wouldn't have sent you to test the potion, he said coldly, looking at Gauda with a compelling and condescending air. Haven't you come to terms with reality yet? The mage summoned me, and I'm on my way to see him. Is your business more important than the mage's? Gauda asked calmly. If not, please step aside. The young man's expression immediately turned ugly. But he quickly regained his composure, then slightly stepped aside, making way for him, and said with a grin, why didn't you say earlier that the mage was looking for you? Fine, go ahead, but don't delay the mage's business. Gauda glanced at the young man, said nothing, and walked past him with a cold face. You think I can't do anything to you just because you survived the drug test? As Gauda passed the young man, he heard his deep, threatening voice creak. After uttering those words, the young man returned to the room he had just left and closed the door. Let's hurry, don't keep the mage waiting. Gauda remained unfazed by the young man's harsh words and said to the experienced apprentice leading the way. The experienced apprentice nodded and continued walking. After going a little further, he couldn't help but say, sigh, Gauda, you survived the mage's drug test this time, which means you weren't meant to die. But you can't always be this lucky. Why did you provoke Yilin? Everyone knows he's incredibly vengeful. Gauda's eyes flickered. So that was the young man's name. Yilin, he asked tentatively. Elan was Master Seda's first apprentice, so Master Seda treats him somewhat differently. He's the only one among us who can freely enter and leave the herb garden, even if it's to sell goods for the master. It's enough to show he's different from us. And let's not talk about anything else, just the fact that so many batches of apprentices have come and gone in the herb garden over the years. Yet he's remained unscathed, says a lot. We can't afford to offend him. What, he can't kill me, can he? Gauda retorted. He might not dare to kill you directly, but making things difficult for you is a piece of cake. Look, if you hadn't been lucky this time, you would have been killed by him, the senior apprentice said. Gauda was stunned for a moment, then realized where Elan's confidence came from. Is it because of him that I was chosen by Master Seda to test a medicine? Otherwise, why would he choose you? You're the only one among us who can independently concoct a basic spider venom potion, so that's how it is. Gauda glanced back at Elan's tightly closed door, his eyes flickering. Chapter 3, Torture. Passing through a narrow, curved corridor, one could see a slightly larger, dark brown door at the end. The mature apprentice who had led the way stopped before the door and cautiously knocked 3 times. The knocking sounded particularly abrupt in the silence. Master Seda, God has arrived. As the voice fell, the tightly closed door opened. Just let him in. A deep, unpleasant voice drifted from inside. The apprentice respectfully replied, yes, and silently withdrew. God's gaze fell upon the doorway. The light inside was very dim, so he couldn't see anything clearly, but the oppressive atmosphere was real, as if a dangerous beast lurked within, ready to devour him at any moment. After a moment's hesitation, God strode in. The instant he stepped into the room, the door silently closed itself again. His vision blurred at first, then was shrouded in a dim yellow light. As far as the eye could see, God saw an extremely long wooden table, on which lay scattered parchment and some simple utensils, a balance scale, a grinder for grinding medicinal powders, and wooden shelves holding numerous slender glass flasks resembling test tubes. To the left of the table was a large bookshelf, neatly arranged with books. Near the right of the table was a crucible, beneath which lay a complex heating device. Gada's gaze quickly swept across the room, finally settling behind the table. There, in a high-backed chair, sat a man of modest stature, his back to him. Gada knew immediately that this was Master Seda. "Master Seda?" Gada said, his eyes fixed on Master Seda's back, bowing slightly at about 15 degrees before returning to his original position. He was unfamiliar with the etiquette of this world, so he could only use the most common Western bow to express his respect for Master Seda. As Gada spoke, Master Seda turned around. Gada, seeing Master Seda's true face for the first time, was slightly startled. From the back, Master Seda, though not tall, appeared normal. But from the front, a deathly pale face, devoid of any vitality, greeted him, as if his end was near. Cough cough, Master Seda coughed twice, speaking weakly. "You've come, my good apprentice, I heard you've woken up." A strange expression flickered across his withered face, a hint of excitement in his eyes. "Tell me quickly, how are you feeling now?" Master Seda stared intently at Gada, a flicker of anxiety and anticipation deep within his eyes. Master Seda's question was expected, he had prepared the answer on the way here. Compared to before taking the medicine, there seems to be no change. Gada shook his head, then hesitated, except for being unconscious for a while. No change. Upon hearing this, Master Seda's expression darkened, and his tone became much harsher. "How could there be no change? Either you're dead, or there shouldn't be no change." Seeing Master Seda's reaction, Gada's heart skipped a beat, and a sense of unease arose. However, he wasn't afraid that Master Seda would realize that his body had been replaced. Because to Master Seda, these apprentices were merely expendable objects. He wouldn't normally pay attention to their habits and personalities, so there was no reason for him to notice the change. "Come here," Master Seda suddenly snorted coldly. Gada put on a fearful expression and hurriedly stepped forward, stopping only when his body was close to the long table, nodding slightly. Not daring to look directly at Master Seda. Master Seda stared intently at Gada, expressionless, and remained silent for a long time. Knowing that the other man was unhappy and not wanting to provoke him, Gada wisely stopped moving and waited for him to speak first. After a long while, Master Seda remained silent. The atmosphere was strange, and Gada felt a little uneasy, his gaze slightly shifting upwards. "Look if you want to look. Why are you sneaking around like this? Are you feeling guilty?" Master Seda's gloomy voice rang out instantly. Gada's gaze froze, then he looked up, his eyes sweeping over Master Seda's face before quickly looking away. Master Seda looked at the timid Gada with a forced smile, his gaze darkening. The next instant, Gada felt a sudden force pushing him forward from behind. He was already close to the long table, and this push caused his upper body to lean forward. Then, as if he had expected this, Master Seda extended his right hand, gripping Gada's neck like a vice. Master Seda's grip wasn't very strong, but it brought Gada indescribable pain. The pain was so intense that Gada almost fainted and felt nauseous, wanting to vomit. It felt as if sharp thorns had sprouted from the hands of the sorcerer Seda, piercing his neck, penetrating his bones, and churning his marrow. Of course, thorns couldn't possibly grow from Seda's hands. Gada understood, this was the effect of the spell. "Sorcerer, he said, his voice trembling. "After taking the medicine, do you really feel no change in your body?" Seda asked again, repeating the question he had asked earlier. "Yes," Gada answered with difficulty, enduring the intense pain. Seda frowned. "It is indeed the truth." After a pause, his voice remained calm as he released Gada. "I doubt you would dare lie to me." "Go." "Yes," Gada, still trembling slightly, hastily replied in a trembling voice, and staggered out of the room. The large room was once again left with only Seda alone. His withered face was indistinct in the shadows, and no one knew what he was thinking. After a long while, the Mage Seda let out a long sigh, venting his frustration. His self-talk echoed in the secluded room. "At least the apprentice who tested the medicine survived this time, which means my direction is correct. Adding sage can effectively neutralize the medicinal conflicts between other herbs, but there's still a problem. Why is there no effect? Is it because the sage also neutralized the psychic properties of the psychic bone powder?" The Mage Seda didn't doubt that God was lying. High above him, He didn't think these ants he could crush with a single hand would dare to play any tricks on him. Even if they dared, did they have the ability? Before magic, all cunning and trickery were futile. Just now, he had cast the spell Torture on God. Torture, necromantic, zero ring, makes contact with a target and interrogates them using the threat of strange pain caused by magic. The target can choose not to answer the question truthfully, but the threat of pain will make you realize the target is lying. The spell proved that Goddard was not lying. Try replacing the 10-year-old sage with 5-year-old sage. Over here, the mage Seda gritted his teeth, finally making up his mind. The reason he had to grit his teeth was that the main ingredient for his potion, spiritual bone powder, was extremely expensive even for him. Moreover, spiritual bone powder was not a common material. Even with money, it wasn't guaranteed to be available, requiring waiting. He had already used up his last purchase of spiritual bone powder. Only one pharmacy in the city regularly stocked small quantities of spiritual bone powder, which he had already bought up entirely. This pharmacy usually restocked once a month, and it was only the second day of the month, meaning there was still almost a month until the pharmacy's next restock. A month. I can only wait. My time is running out. I must seize the time to break through and advance to become a first-ring mage. Chapter 4: The Cultivation of a Mage. As soon as Gauda stepped outside, an undisguised fierceness rose in his eyes. In the face of absolute power, clever tricks are useless, even maneuvering is exhausting. He recalled his recent encounter with the mage Seda, feeling not only unspeakable humiliation but also a sense of relief at escaping death. Although I got away with it this time, it was all luck. Gauda didn't know the exact effect of the spell that seemed to sprout thorns from the mage's palm, but he guessed that if you had lied, the mage would have sensed it. Fortunately, the mage's question was, do you really feel no changes in your body? In fact, after waking up, he hadn't noticed anything unusual about his body. Most likely, all the effects of the potion had been absorbed by his predecessor. It seemed the old man's potion was designed for mental effects, Gauda deduced. Otherwise, inheriting this body shouldn't have caused him any physical discomfort. The not-so-tall mage Seda exerted an immense pressure on Gauda that he had never felt in either his past or present lives. He touched his neck, still shaken, where the sorcerer Seda had gripped him. There was no wound there, but the excruciating pain had been real. That was the power of magic. Even if it was just a trick. The feeling of having one's life in someone else's hands was unpleasant. Although Seda was just a stranger Gauda had met once, Gauda's hatred for him had reached its peak. Gauda knew he was too weak to be a match for Seda. The other was powerful. He had to be patient and secretly seek an opportunity. The question was, how much time did he have left? Gauda didn't know he actually only had a month left. But he knew that Seda valued the unknown potion highly, trying again and again despite never succeeding in concocting it over the years, a testament to his unwavering determination. Now that Seda had discovered he survived after testing the potion, he must believe the potion was nearing completion. Therefore, Seda would definitely try to concoct the potion again soon. The person who will be tested on the drug will most likely be him again. After all, he's the only one so far who didn't die after the drug test. God, you're finally back. As soon as God returned to his room, Amy rushed over and asked, what did Master Seda want with you? God told the truth. Master Seda asked me about my experience after taking the drug. I knew it. Master Seda's potion is finally successfully made. We're going to have good days ahead. Amy was very excited. Perhaps, God didn't shatter Amy's illusions. By the way, I just ran into Elon. He pondered for a moment, seemingly casually. What, did he come to cause you trouble again? Amy's expression changed upon hearing this, and she asked nervously. More or less, but it's nothing serious. He only gave me some verbal harassment. He couldn't really do anything to me, God said nonchalantly. That's not how it works. Amy was much more concerned than God. Elon has spent the most time with Mage Seda, so he can at least speak to him. I heard that the reason you went to test the potions this time is because of him. Really? I don't have any grudge against him. Why would he go to such lengths? God was incredulous. He's a petty and jealous person. He's already unhappy with your outstanding talent, and you don't like to talk to him. How could he not resent you? Besides, you've mastered potion mixing so quickly. Elon must be afraid that if this continues, Mage Seda will value you more and more, until you replace him in Mage Seda's eyes. You can't afford to offend him right now. It's better to just pretend to be friendly with him for now. Amy advised tactfully. Gauda's gaze sharpened slightly. After a moment's thought, he said, I understand. Amy assumed Gauda had heeded her advice and immediately breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. Elon's job is to ship goods for Master Seda? Gauda asked casually. Yes, his job is the easiest. He only needs to ship goods once every 4 or 5 days, and he can even take the opportunity to go sightseeing in the city. Unlike us, who are toiling away in the herb garden all day long, Amy said this with some indignation. I see. Gauda's eyes darted around, as if he was thinking about something. Then, he intentionally or unintentionally learned a lot of information about the herb garden from Amy through various topics, gaining a basic understanding of their current situation. Oh dear, Amy slapped her forehead, as if she had remembered something, and hurriedly said, let's hurry up and eat. If we go any later, there probably won't be anything left. She pulled Gauda towards the restaurant, not forgetting to take credit. I missed a mealtime because I was waiting for you to come back. It was dinner time. In Master Seda's herb garden, meals were served 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If we disregarded the experimentation with medicine, for most of the apprentices, who were born beggars, this was practically paradise. Most commoners only ate 2 meals a day. Led by Amy, Gauda arrived at the dining hall where the apprentices ate. It was called a dining hall, but the space was only slightly larger than their bedrooms. It contained 3 square wooden tables, each with a candle made of 3 candlesticks, and a fireplace. Gauda and his companions arrived quite late, only 2 or 3 apprentices remained. Amy glanced nervously at the large platter beside the fireplace, and seeing 2 long black loaves of bread left, she breathed a sigh of relief. Beside the platter was a clay pot for stewing. Gauda, who hadn't eaten anything except a sip of water since waking up, felt hungry and followed Amy over. Next to the large plate were some cutlery. Gauda picked up a small plate, placed a long loaf of bread on it, and then picked up a small bowl, looking at the stew pot. The stew pot contained pea soup made from a local specialty of peas. After ladles filled their bowls with pea soup, Gauda and Amy chose an empty table to sit down. Rye bread and pea soup. This was their daily food as apprentices. Meat? Forget about it. And although it was called bread, it was completely different from what Gauda knew about bread. This rye bread didn't contain yeast, so it was exceptionally hard, the taste was definitely not good, and it was extremely difficult to chew. Of course, it wasn't without its advantages. It was cheap. 4 pounds, about 1.8 kg, of rye bread only cost 6 copper coins. Gauda mentally converted it, which was equivalent to 3.5 copper coins per kilogram of rye bread. The cheapest meat, on the other hand, cost 7 copper coins per pound, about 450 grams. The value of rye bread was self-evident. Amy used a knife to slice the long strip of rye bread, arranging the slices on a plate. She then spooned pea soup over the bread slices before putting them in her mouth. This was the proper way to eat rye bread, soaking it slightly in the soup to soften it, otherwise it would be choking. Of course, soaking the bread slices directly in the soup was also a very common way. Gord followed Amy's example, cutting the rye bread into several slices, soaking them in the pea soup, and then putting them in his mouth. The next moment, he couldn't help but frown. Even though he was mentally prepared, the food was still more unpalatable than he had expected. The pea soup had no seasoning whatsoever, the bread slices soaked in the soup were merely slightly softer, and the taste, if he had to describe it, was only slightly better than sawdust. For Gord, this food was undoubtedly terrifying, but for the other apprentices, having this kind of bread to eat was already quite a treat. However, Gauda had no choice now, the hunger in his stomach forced him to swallow the rye bread with a frown. Thus, he had another reason to rebel against Master Seda. If he could only eat this kind of food every day, what difference would it make from death? After dinner, it was the apprentices' time for practice. The apprentices in the herb garden had a very regular daily routine. They were busy with their work during the day, and in the evening, they had a fixed 3 to 4 hours of practice time. After returning to her room, Amy seized the time and quickly entered a mage's magehood state. Gauda, on the other hand, first reviewed the mage's cultivation methods in his mind. A mage's 2 most important basic indicators were mana and mental strength. Mana was the energy consumed when casting spells, also known as the blue bar, the foundation of all a mage's power. Mental strength concerns the control and learning of spells. It determines a person's spellcasting skills, the stability of continuous spellcasting, the variability of spells, and even the speed of learning spells. The growth of both mana and mental strength relies on day-to-day, tedious, and repetitive practice. There is absolutely no room for laziness, and there are no shortcuts. Begin the guidance. First, enter a state of tranquility. The method for cultivating mana is called guidance, and the method for cultivating mental strength is called meditation. The two are separate and cannot be practiced simultaneously. Generally, guidance is practiced first, followed by meditation. This is because the process of practicing guidance also consumes mental strength. Once mental strength is depleted by more than 40%, continuing to practice guidance becomes much less effective. For Gauda, this is not difficult to understand. It's like studying. The first few hours are definitely the most effective, but as mental fatigue sets in, learning efficiency naturally decreases. Practicing meditation after guidance not only quickly restores depleted mental strength but also enhances its growth. In Gauda's own understanding, this is like exercise, constantly repeating the process of consuming physical strength. Restoring physical strength better stimulates physical strength growth. Chapter 5 Extraordinary Items. Based on his memory, Gauda sat cross-legged on the bed. He kept his chin parallel to the floor, closed his eyes, straightened his back, and placed his hands on his knees, palms facing upwards with fingers relaxed. This seated posture made him feel extremely comfortable and relaxed, facilitating a deeper state of meditation. Of course, experienced mages could easily enter a meditative state in almost any posture and environment, without needing these assistances, but Gauda was still just an apprentice, so he strictly followed the procedure. After several minutes of deep breathing, Gauda finally entered a meditative state. In his consciousness, he felt as if he were in a dark universe. Countless stardust floated in this universe, drifting aimlessly, beautiful and captivating, emitting twinkling starlight. This was the magic that existed in the world, the cornerstone of its power. It was abundant, powerful, and inexhaustible. The so-called guiding technique was to use one's mental power to guide this magic into one's body and refine it into magical power. Gauda began to try to guide these magical stardust with his mental power. This magic, guided by his mind and will, entered his body with each breath, descending to his navel before settling. This wasn't the end. After sensing the magic dust had settled, Gauda still needed to manipulate his mind and will, refining the magic in rhythm with his breathing until it became his own mana. Frankly, the whole process wasn't very efficient. This was because the guidance and meditation techniques Gauda practiced had a unified name: apprentice guidance and apprentice meditation. As the name suggests, these were methods specifically for mage apprentices, the most basic things. Their weakness was their basic nature, but their strength was also their fundamental nature. For building a foundation, they were flawless, but their efficiency was certainly not high. Gauda was immersed in his first practice until he began to feel tired, and the efficiency of guiding the magic dust had decreased by about 30% compared to the beginning. He then stopped. He knew that his mental energy consumption had reached a critical point of 40%, and it was time to switch to meditation. Gauda readjusted his posture, regulated his breathing for a moment, closed his eyes according to the requirements of the apprentice meditation technique, and began his practice. The practice of meditation is similar to the visualization techniques often mentioned in Buddhism in his previous life, involving conjuring up something strange and mysterious in the mind to enhance mental power. The apprentice meditation technique manifests a 16-petaled lotus flower, and the number of petals manifested is directly proportional to the progress of practice. Once all 16 petals are manifested, the apprentice meditation technique is considered to have been perfected. However, Gauda's current progress is far from perfection. If he remembers correctly, his predecessor had only managed to manifest 5 petals so far, and that was only because his predecessor had exceptionally good mental talent. This progress is already quite good. It should be noted that apprentices who started practicing at the same time as Gauda, or even earlier, are only at the level of 1 or 2 petals. As his mind immersed itself, Gauda clearly perceived the existence of mental power. In the endless darkness of consciousness, a lotus flower slowly rotated, existing in his mind. However, this flower lacked a physical form, it was merely an outline drawn with dotted lines. The purpose of meditation was to fill these dotted lines with mental power, fully manifesting the true lotus. Gauda was about to materialize the lotus as he remembered, but suddenly he noticed something new deep within his consciousness, shimmering with light. Instinctively, a thought struck him, and his mental power and attention focused on the radiant point. Deep within the space of consciousness, darkness remained. But beyond that, there were countless irregularly wandering stars and 2 sets of fixed magical models composed of stars, resembling galaxies. These were 2 magic tricks Gata possessed. Overall, the depths of the space of consciousness resembled a sea of stars. Hence, this place was also known as the Magical Star Sea. However, today, besides the stars and magical models, something else had appeared in the Magical Star Sea. Something that shouldn't exist. It was a crescent moon. Floating silently and steadily at the very center of the Magical Star Sea, motionless, it radiated a pure, bright white light. More accurately, it was a crescent-shaped gemstone. Its shape resembled a magadama, white and round at one end, tapering to a point at the other. It was entirely white, but not milky white, rather, it was the pure white of the moon. The gemstone was crystal clear, without a single impurity, and its surface was covered with intricate and beautiful patterns and designs, like strange symbols. Yes, they grew, not carved. Because there was absolutely no trace of processing, these patterns and designs were seamlessly integrated with the gemstone, perfectly natural. Gata stared blankly at this crescent-shaped gemstone that existed only in his mind, incredulous. Isn't this the pendant I used to wear around my neck? It was a family heirloom of the Gao family, strung together by his father and passed down to him. Gata had worn this pendant for over a decade, never noticing anything unusual about it. But now, this item, which didn't belong to this world, had somehow traveled to this world with him. And it had transformed from a tangible existence into an illusory one, taking root within his magical cosmos. Even something as seemingly impossible as time travel had occurred. Having another gem in his head didn't seem so unacceptable. But why this particular gem? It meant it must possess something special. Gata tried to remain calm, recalling information about the gem. Then he realized that when his father passed it on to him, he hadn't explained its origins in detail. Gata only knew that the gem was undoubtedly valuable, and that it was certainly not a work of art made from agate or talc, but a natural gem. Because it was so exquisite, so intricate, that it seemed unman-made. Only the divine craftsmanship of nature could forge such a work of art. Gata observed it carefully for a while, but found nothing unusual. An extremely rare extraordinary object, he tentatively judged the gem's origin based on his understanding of this world, and the fact that it traveled with me to this world alone is enough to prove its grade is definitely not low. Gata cautiously probed the crescent-shaped gem with his spiritual energy. This was the most common way he remembered activating extraordinary objects. Gata attempted to activate this extraordinary object to learn its function. However, the moment his spiritual energy touched the gem, it was like hitting a wall, immediately bouncing back. Gata thought for a moment, then, no longer cautious, mobilized all his spiritual energy to try activating it again. Once, twice, 3 times, until Gata felt somewhat exhausted, the crescent moon remained fixed there, unchanged, without moving an inch, completely unmoved. He was greatly alarmed. At first, he thought he had simply been too cautious and therefore failed to activate this magical object, but later, he had already given it his all, yet he still failed. Gata carefully examined the gem again, trying to discover some mechanism. The result was still fruitless. Now Gata was troubled. Having this foreign object in his mind, and not knowing its purpose, was something no one could accept. The problem was, this thing was like a stubborn resident, firmly established in his head. His mental power couldn't budge it an inch, it wouldn't leave. No matter how unwilling he was, he couldn't change anything. Most likely it's because my current mental power is too weak, so I can't activate or move it, Gata guessed. Never mind, having no way to deal with it, Gata finally decided to give up. At least he could confirm that this gem, which had inexplicably followed him through time, wasn't harmful to his body. That was enough. So, Gata withdrew his attention from the gem, calmed himself for a while, and then re-entered a meditative state. The lotus flower formed by dotted lines in his consciousness gradually solidified under Gata's meditation. The lotus platform materialized, and Gata gradually materialized the 5 petals upon it. Nearly 2 hours later, Gata opened his eyes. A deep sense of exhaustion washed over him. The mental energy he had expended while practicing the guiding technique had been restored through meditation, but the restoration of mental energy did not mean the elimination of fatigue. On the contrary, according to the memories left by his predecessor, a good night's sleep after meditation would be the most effective. Amy had finished her practice earlier than him and was already asleep, her soft snores filling the air. Gata also quietly removed his outer garments, lay down on the bed, and recalled what he had seen and heard since arriving in this world, pondering how to escape and other matters. Chapter 6 Night Assassination. The night deepened. Amy's soft snoring gradually subsided. The herb garden was deathly silent. A creak, the sound of a wooden door being pushed open, not loud, flashed by, but didn't break the stillness of the night. "Who is it?" Elon's groggy voice rang out. "It's me. Oh, God? What are you doing here?" Elon wasn't fully awake. His mind was still foggy. "Elon, I figured you'd be fast asleep by now, so I came to find you." "What do you mean?" Elon was about to get up, but in the darkness, by the moonlight, he could see a blurry figure that had moved to his bedside during the brief exchange. A dark shadow was reflected on the wall, the figure holding a sharp knife, which was about to stab him as the shadow's hand fell. Ah! Elon's heart skipped a beat, all sleepiness vanished, and he instantly became wide awake, goosebumps rising on his skin. Instinctively, he raised his right hand, trying to block the possible attack. It was too late. A soft thud. A piercing pain shot through his chest. Something sharp and cold had pierced his chest. It was a dinner knife, the kind used in restaurants to cut rye bread, not very sharp, but barely enough as a deadly weapon. Gouda had pressed his knee against Elon's throat, using his left hand to firmly hold Elon's body down, while his right hand gripped the knife steadily. Thud. 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 He pulled out the knife, stabbed again, stabbed again, stabbed again. Crimson blood flowed down his hand, warm in the cold night, but offering no warmth to Gouda. He only felt nauseous. Only when Elon's body was completely limp, showing no further signs of struggle, did Gouda stop. He gasped for breath. So, this is murder. Everything had proceeded as Gouda had planned, even more smoothly. Still half asleep, Yilin had no idea that Geode would dare to kill her. Faced with Geode's nighttime attack, she was utterly powerless. Everything was much simpler than she had imagined. But the discomfort of killing for the first time didn't disappear just because she had planned it. The devil's easy to deal with, but his minions are hard to handle. Even if Yilin can't kill me outright like the sorcerer Seda, he still holds a grudge. Who knows what tricks he'll use to annoy me. Besides, his constant surveillance makes it difficult for me to act later. I can't rest easy until he's dead. Furthermore, I've already died once from Yilin's scheme to test a drug. This is a blood feud, a blood debt must be repaid. It's only right, he forced me to do this. Geode's hands were still trembling. He kept finding reasons to force himself to calm down, to adapt. He had to adapt. Geode understood that, given his situation, if he didn't want to die, someone else had to. Clang. Suddenly, Gouda's pupils dilated sharply, as if he had seen something horrifying. He was so startled that he dropped the kitchen knife from his hand, it clattering against the floor. Although Gouda's hands had been trembling since the murder, they weren't so shaky as to be unable to hold a knife properly. This was purely because he had been startled. Just now, Gouda clearly sensed that the crescent-shaped gem in his mind, the one whose use he had never understood, had been activated, suddenly emitting a shimmering light. Immediately afterward, several lines of information, common in games and novels, appeared before his eyes. Origin. 0 rings, human, 1/7, spells. 0 rings, hand of the mage, repair. The interface was very simple, even rudimentary. With only 2 information bars, spells and origin. The spells bar displayed the 2 spells Gouda currently possessed. And next to the 2 spells, a small yellow plus sign was flashing. This incredibly familiar design was instantly recognizable to anyone who had ever played a game. At points, Gouda tentatively tapped the yellow plus sign next to the healing spell with his mind. The next instant, information, like an implanted memory, inexplicably surfaced in Gouda's mind. Insufficient source, clearly, adding points required consuming source. Gouda's attention naturally turned to the source section on the interface, humans, 1/7. The information was brief and without any further explanation, but Gouda instantly understood. His gaze fell on the corpse of Elon on the bed. Do I need to kill 7 humans to gain a single point of source? Gouda muttered to himself. It was still dark. The mage Seda was awakened by the inexplicable commotion in the herb garden. People his age were always light sleepers, and known for their bad temper. He pushed open the door with displeasure, took a few steps, and grabbed a passing apprentice. What did you say? Upon hearing the apprentice's trembling words, the mage Seda was also taken aback. Passing through the narrow corridor, Master Seda arrived at the apprentice's living quarters, a place he rarely frequented. "Master," an apprentice stammered, his face filled with panic and fear. "Elon, he's dead. What happened?" Master Seda's voice remained calm, but the coldness within was unmistakable. "I just arrived here too," the apprentice stammered, unable to answer. Master Seda lost his patience. His face hardened as he strode forward, traversing the narrow corridor, finally stopping before Elon's door. His gaze fell upon the room. Elon's not particularly tall body lay sprawled on the wooden bed against the wall, his chest a pool of blood, his eyes wide and white. Clearly, he was dead. The manner of death was simple: stabbed. The murder weapon was likely a dagger-like blade. Master Seda frowned, suppressing his anger, and turned his gaze to another corner of the room. A young boy sat there, a blood-stained dinner knife lying on the ground beside him. His hands were covered in crimson blood. Master Seda didn't usually pay much attention to his apprentices, but his memory was excellent. There were no bad memories among mages. He remembered this boy. He was the only apprentice to survive the drug trials over the years. "You did this?" Master Seda asked, his voice filled with displeasure and coldness. "Yes," God replied, raising his head. His face was still pale, but his eyes were calm. "What happened?" Master Seda asked again. "I first stole the dinner knife used for cutting bread while I was eating in the dining hall." God pointed to the blood-stained knife on the ground. "It wasn't very sharp, but it was enough. Then, I waited until late at night, figuring he was fast asleep, and then I quietly crept over," God explained. "He was older and stronger than me. If I hadn't found a good opportunity, I might not have been able to kill him. In the end, he died, killed by me, thanks to my good brother, Weiming Chengguang, for being the alliance leader." The boss is confused. Chapter 7 Life is as worthless as grass. Master Seda's face was ashen, whether from Elon's death, from the calm after God's killing, or both. "How dare you kill him? You are all my apprentices, my private property. Only I have the right to decide your life and death." "I know," God nodded, a look of helplessness on his pale face, explaining, "but he wanted me dead, so I had no choice but to let him die first. After all, I don't want to die yet." He raised his head, meeting Master Seda's gaze directly, appearing utterly sincere. "You killed my apprentice without my permission. That's trespassing on my property, and you must pay with your life." Master Seda stared coldly at God, unmoved. "It's better to die at the hands of the mage than at the hands of this scoundrel," God said, glancing at the stiff corpse on the bed. "Besides, he's probably the one who really wants to seize your property. Yilin told me yesterday that he wanted me dead. My worthless life is nothing to me, but if it delays your potion-making process, that would be a huge mistake," God said meaningfully. This was the source of his confidence in assassinating Yilin at night. God was certain that no matter what the mage Seda thought about him killing Yilin, or how he would react, he would never actually make him pay with his life now. Because at this moment, he had a replaceable value to the mage Seda. He was the only apprentice who had survived so far after the potion trials. The mage Seda needed God for the next potion trial to successfully concoct the potion as soon as possible. Therefore, before the next trial, the mage Seda would definitely not let him die. The next drug trial was both a Damocles sword hanging over God's head and a get-out-of-jail-free card. And indeed it was. For the powerful and influential sorcerer Seda, the fact that he didn't immediately eliminate God after discovering Elon's death, but instead continued to talk nonsense with him, meant that God was valuable to him, someone he couldn't directly eliminate at this point. And God's ambitions didn't stop there. He took a breath and spoke again to the mage Seda. "My lord, Elon defied your authority first, and I acted in self-defense. Furthermore, what Elon did, I can do as well, and it won't affect my original work. Losing him won't actually harm you, my lord. You'll even save yourself a mouth to feed." "Self-defense? Ha, you call that self-defense? A despicable tactic for power." After hearing what God said, the mage Seda glanced at the messy room, seemingly understanding everything, and coldly said, "Even if Elon deserves his punishment, how I punished him is my business, not yours. Your assassination attempt on him crossed the line. You tested my potion. If my potion had succeeded, you would have received considerable benefits, and I would have truly taken you as my apprentice, but your cleverness will prevent you from receiving that treatment. You'll regret what you've done today." The mage Seda scoffed before God could react, turning and walking away. "From now on, you'll do his work, but all you'll get is his job." Clearly, The Mage Seda understood Gauda's reliance and his desires. Watching the Mage Seda leave, Gauda remained completely unmoved by his threat. Regarding the Mage Seda's claim of significant benefits after the potion is successfully made, Gauda simply didn't believe this old fox would be so kind. Furthermore, he knew the probability of successfully making the potion was extremely low. In the Mage Seda's eyes, Gauda's survival after the potion test meant he was incredibly close to success. But Gauda knew the truth all too well. The Mage Seda was far from successful. As for the idea of regretting his actions, that was utterly insignificant. If he didn't resist, the next potion test would be his death. Why would he care about what happened afterward? This nighttime assassination attempt on Elon, seemingly reckless, was actually a well-thought-out plan by Gauda. The consequences were minimal. His situation wouldn't worsen anyway. The gains, however, were plentiful. While resolving a major problem, he also mentally prepared himself for the prospect of murder in this cannibalistic environment. Most importantly, he regained the freedom to enter and leave the herb garden that originally belonged to Elon. Only by venturing out could he have a better chance of escaping his current predicament. As for the inexplicably activated crescent-shaped gem, that was an even greater surprise. Whoosh! A basin of water washed away the last trace of blood from the room. Gauda wiped the sweat from his brow. Although the matter of Elon was temporarily closed, the scene still needed to be cleaned up. Otherwise, it would be not only gruesome but also cause the corpse to decompose over time. The Mage Seda hadn't assigned anyone to handle the cleanup, so Gauda, as the murderer, dutifully took over. The room was now clean. "Let's bury his body in the back hill," Amy, who had volunteered to stay and help, said. "The apprentices who did the drug trials are buried there too," Gauda nodded, offering no objection. The two of them, one holding his legs and the other his shoulders, lifted Elon's body. Amy looked at his roommate, whom he should have known intimately but now felt strangely distant from, and hesitated for a long time before whispering to Gauda, "I really didn't expect you to do something like this." He was somewhat timid, because after seeing Elon's death, he instinctively felt a sense of dread towards Gauda. Most people are afraid of murderers. "What would you do if someone wanted to kill you?" Gauda asked. Amy was stunned, unable to think of an answer for a moment. He understood Gauda's meaning, but also knew that he would be at a loss in this situation, certainly not as decisive as Gauda. "Let's go, you lead the way." Seeing Amy's fear of him, Gauda was no longer as cautious as before. After burying Elon's body, Gauda and Amy returned to the herb garden. It was just breakfast time for the apprentices. The two had been busy for a long time, especially Gauda, who had been extremely exhausted from killing and burying the body, and was starving. He immediately rushed to the dining hall. When the apprentices saw Gauda enter, the previously noisy environment immediately quieted down, leaving only the sound of chewing. Witnessing Elon's death had a significant impact on these apprentices, who were still technically children. At this moment, the apprentices all saw him as a tiger. Gauda seemed oblivious, taking his breakfast and finding an empty seat. He took a large bite of the rye bread soaked in pea soup. The texture was still indescribable, but it wasn't as unpalatable as before. He didn't know if it was because of hunger or something else. As Gauda swallowed his breakfast, he reviewed his schedule for the day. Although he had killed someone in the middle of the night, he still had to continue working. In the mornings, he was responsible for cultivating some of the herbs in the herb garden and feeding the little gray mice. In the afternoons, he would prepare basic spider venom potions, and in the evenings, he would practice his cultivation. Day after day, it was a very fixed and monotonous schedule. After drinking the last sip of hot pea soup, Gauda got up, said goodbye to Amy, and headed to the backyard. That was the herb cultivation area in the garden. In the past day, through his roommate Amy, Gauda had gained a general understanding of the terrain and layout of the herb garden, and could basically navigate to each area independently. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8, Repair Techniques. Passing through a narrow, dimly lit corridor, the view suddenly opened up, and the light became bright. The fragrance of herbs wafted through the air, and a vibrant green expanse came into view, making Gauda feel as if the musty smell on him had been dispelled. This herb cultivation area, though not particularly large, consisted of several plots with different soil types. This is because herbs are inherently delicate flowers and grasses, requiring meticulous care. Different herbs have different, even extreme, requirements for their growing environment. Leaving aside external factors like temperature and water quality, the soil requirements of different herbs are quite complex. Most herbs can grow in loose, fertile, and well-drained soil. However, some herbs prefer to grow in humus-rich forest humus soil, such as ginseng. Others prefer acidic or slightly acidic soil or riverbank sand. Therefore, it is essential to select suitable soil for planting based on the specific growth habits and characteristics of each herb. Herbal cultivation is a profound discipline. It requires not only the ability to identify medicinal herbs and a thorough understanding of their characteristics, but also the knowledge of how to create a suitable growing environment to ensure survival rates, increase yields, and enhance medicinal properties. This work includes, but is not limited to, preparing nutrient soil, thinning seedlings, transplanting seedlings, deep plowing combined with fertilization to improve soil physical properties, hilling, weeding, fertilizing, irrigation, disease and pest control, and adjusting plant shape. Gauda's morning work mainly consisted of hilling, fertilizing, watering, and checking for diseases and pests. Generally, once proficient, these tasks become simple repetitive work. Because the types of herbs cultivated by Master Seda were fixed, even though it was Gauda's first time doing these tasks, relying on the memories left by his predecessor, he completed the herbal cultivation work efficiently and without any mistakes. Having finished these, only one task remained for his morning. Gauda hurried to a small room. The room contained numerous iron cages, each holding 5 to 10 grayish-brown mice. These were specially bred by Master Seda for live drug experiments. While human trials yielded the most accurate results, even if human life weren't that precious, it certainly didn't allow Master Seda to recklessly use living humans for drug testing. Animal trials were the primary method. Gray mice were prolific, inexpensive to raise, relatively less aggressive, and, given these factors, highly similar to humans, referring to genetic similarity, not appearance. Therefore, they naturally became the ideal subjects for live experiments. Gauda poured some food into the feeding bowls of each cage, filled them with water, and then checked the condition of all the mice. He noticed that one mouse appeared sickly and lacked the energy to even try to eat. Upon closer inspection, Gauda noticed that the little gray mouse's back resembled alopecia areata, with a small patch of fur completely gone, revealing the slightly reddish skin underneath. Looks like it has some kind of skin disease, Gauda concluded, nodding. That's you. He lifted the sick little gray mouse out of the cage. Of course, Gauda wasn't going to treat it. Firstly, he didn't know how, and secondly, there was no need. Because gray mice were far less valuable than medicinal herbs, the apprentices in the herb garden didn't care for them as much as they did for medicinal herbs, so some gray mice would occasionally fall ill. The only fate for these sick gray mice was early detection and humane euthanasia to prevent the disease from spreading to other healthy mice. Gauda didn't hold back. He grabbed the little gray mouse's head, twisted it forcefully along its neck, and with a crisp snap, the little gray mouse didn't even have time to struggle before it fell silent. Gauda casually tossed the dead gray mouse aside, his attention focused on his mind. Deep within his mind, a beautifully crafted crescent-shaped gem was now radiating light. Some changes had occurred. Inside the gem, 2 points of light and 12 dotted lines had appeared, forming 2 sieve diagrams resembling the Big Dipper. Each sieve diagram had 7 points and 6 dotted lines, but at this moment only the starting point was flashing, while the remaining 6 points were dim. It was easy to deduce that the diagram was complete only when all 7 points were lit. The next instant, a familiar information interface appeared before Gauda's eyes. Origin: 0 rings, human, 1/7, gray-eyed mouse, 1/7, spells. 0 rings, Mage's hand, repair spell. Compared to before, the origin information panel had added another entry, gray-eyed mouse. It was the little gray mouse's scientific name, just as I thought, Gauda murmured to himself. Upon first seeing this information interface, Gauda was certain that the origin source couldn't be obtained solely from humans. It should be able to expand into multiple entries, similar to the spells section, though he had only unlocked the human entry so far. While burying Elon's body in the back mountain, Gauda casually crushed a few unknown insects to verify his hypothesis, but no new entries appeared in the origin source section. Either the method of obtaining the origin source wasn't killing, or the insects were too weak to provide it. After all, before the human entry, there was a rank classification. 0 ring. And to obtain 0 ring origin source, it was highly likely that it could only be obtained from 0 ring creatures. Elon was a mage apprentice, and according to the mage rank classification, he was a 0 ring mage, who could provide origin source. The latter possibility was clearly more likely. Speculation alone wouldn't yield the correct answer, experimentation was necessary. And in the herb garden, besides the mage apprentices, there happened to be another 0 ring creature. The gray-eyed rat, commonly known as the little gray rat, is so weak it's easily slaughtered, yet in terms of rank, it truly shares the same level as a mage apprentice, both are at the 0 ring stage. This is because the gray-eyed rat possesses an extremely thin layer of leline creature bloodline. This meager bloodline doesn't grant it any extraordinary abilities or the immense strength of leline creatures, but it elevates it beyond the ranks of ordinary animals, placing it in the 0 ring category, and even among 0 rings, there are differences. With the hypothesis confirmed, the rest was a matter of course. Killing 7 people is difficult, but killing 7 little gray rats is a piece of cake. Gata immediately took action. He grabbed another healthy little gray rat from the iron cage. The little gray rat kicked its legs desperately in Gata's hand, emitting sharp squeaking sounds, but it was all in vain, like a weak girl about to be violated but powerless to resist. Gata carefully examined the little gray mouse for several seconds. After confirming that the panel hadn't changed, he silently reached out his other hand towards the mouse, which seemed used to being held and had stopped struggling. With a crisp snap, the little gray mouse fell silent. The next moment, another point of light lit up inside the gem. Origin. 0 rings, human, 1/7, gray-eyed mouse, 2/7, sure enough, death is a necessary condition. I just don't know if it has to be by my hand to count, Gauda muttered to himself. This could be verified later, there was no rush. The most urgent task was to obtain the first complete origin. He put down the dead little gray mouse in his hand and glanced at the little gray mice in the iron cage, whose fates were still unknown. The little gray mice weren't valuable and were frequently lost, so even if 7 died in a day, no one would care. In addition, Gata was eager to know the effect of the origin, so 5 more little gray mice immediately sacrificed their lives for it. Soon. Origin. 0 ring, human, 1/7, gray-eyed rat, 7/7. At this moment, the crescent-shaped gem remained fixed in the very center of God's magical star sea, motionless. However, inside the gem, 7 more shimmering points of light appeared, and the 6 dotted lines had become bright solid lines. The points of light and the solid lines formed an inseparable model, like the Big Dipper, slowly rotating, exceptionally beautiful. Come on, let me see what you're capable of, God muttered to himself, while his attention shifted to the 2 spells he possessed in the spell bar. Each had a small yellow plus sign flashing. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to experiment with a repair spell. Repair, alteration, 0 ring. This spell can repair a break or crack on an object you touch, such as repairing a broken chain, a key broken in 2, a torn cloak, a leaky wine bag, etc. As long as the damage or breakage is no more than 1 foot in any direction, you can repair it without leaving a trace. This spell can physically repair a spell item or construct, but it will not restore the spell on such items. Gata once again mentally tapped the yellow plus sign after the repair spell. Add point. The change occurred instantly. Within the gem, the complete set of Big Dipper representing the origin of the gray-eyed rat stopped rotating and began to flow, swimming directly out from within the crescent-shaped gem. They moved towards the spell model representing the repair spell. A spell model is the foundation upon which a mage casts spells. It is composed of stardust from the spell's galaxy, resembling a constellation of stars in the vast universe. However, the lines between constellations commonly seen in books are artificially connected for observation and understanding of constellation composition, while the lines between spell models are real. Following the instructions of the spell formula, the mage uses their mental power to guide the stars in the spell's cosmos, using mental power as a framework to fix the stars, thus constructing a spell model composed of stars. Once the spell model is successfully constructed, it means the mage has initially mastered the spell and can now cast the corresponding spell through the model. Each spell model is unique, even vastly different, with almost stringent requirements regarding the number of stars and their distance and direction. Even the slightest error will fail. Therefore, mastering a spell is extremely difficult and time-consuming, typically requiring hundreds or even thousands of failures before successfully constructing a spell model. Now, the Big Dipper is targeting the spell model, which can be considered the most important thing for a mage. The Big Dipper moves swiftly, and in an instant, it has already collided with the spell model of the repair spell. There was no collision. The next instant, a flash of light, and the 7 shimmering points of light merged into the spell model like swallows returning to their nest. This is, in Gauda's stunned silence, the previously complete repair spell model, after the light points merged, seemed to be rejuvenated, sprouting new branches and leaves. At certain nodes, it began to extend outwards, creating new lines and stars. The entire process was remarkably stable and natural. Some nodes extended a line and a star, others extended more, but these changes did not disrupt the original basic structure of the spell model. Although only 7 light points were added, the final number of stars extending from the repair spell model far exceeded 7, it grew into a full 13 stars before stopping. The Big Dipper had disappeared, and the repair spell model returned to calm, no longer undergoing any new changes. Looking at the spell model, now completely different from the theoretical repair model, some information instinctively and inexplicably surfaced in Gauda's mind. This information told Gauda that the new spell model before him was still the zero-ring transformation spell, repair, and its effect remained unchanged. Its function was still to repair minor damage to the target item. Compared to the original repair spell, it has something extra. Under the new spell model, repair can restore the spell originally attached to a spell item when repairing it. It may seem like just a small change, but Gauda's vision is not so short-sighted. He clearly understands that this is a qualitative leap. In the terms of the world he came from, this process is skill enhancement. This enhancement is not just a simple increase in stats, but a strengthening of a higher-level mechanism. The simple information interface has also changed. Origin. 0 ring, human, 1/7, gray-eyed rat, used, spells. 0 ring, mage hand, repair plus. The 0 ring spell, repair, has become repair plus, under the effect of origin, and the yellow plus sign after its name has disappeared. Repair plus, alteration, 0 ring. This spell can repair a break or crack in an object you touch, such as a broken chain, a key broken in two, a torn cloak, or a leaky wine bag. As long as the break or crack is no more than 1 foot in any direction, you can repair it without leaving a trace. This spell can physically repair a spell item or construct, but it will not restore the spell on that item. Bonus: when you repair a spell item, you will restore the spell on that item. Chapter 9 Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Although Gauda didn't have much knowledge of the mage world, he could understand just how exaggerated this ability to enhance spells was. This was a sublimation of the essence of magic. A complete source can enhance a spell of a corresponding rank. If I master more spells in the future and enhance all the spells I know, just thinking about it was enough to excite Gauda. What was this equivalent to? It was like others playing the normal version of the same game, while he was playing the modified version. This was even more awesome than a pay-to-win player. Is this the effect you're talking about? Gauda's attention shifted back to the crescent-shaped gem floating in the very center of his magical sea of stars, and he was filled with amazement. At this moment, he understood that this gem was absolutely an extraordinary treasure, or rather, it should be called priceless. While marveling at the magic of the crescent gem, Gauda grabbed another gray-eyed rat from the cage, and with a familiar thud, sent it away again. His mind was immersed in his thoughts. Within the gem, after the Big Dipper constellation representing the gray-eyed rat's origin was integrated into the spell model of repair, only 1 point of light remained flickering. This 8th gray-eyed rat did not light up a new point for Gauda. Origin. 0 ring, human, 1/7, gray-eyed rat, used. A creature can only obtain 1 point of origin. Gauda had anticipated this, but speculation is speculation. Ultimately, it must be verified through practice. It is evident that while the crescent moon gem is powerful, it is not without limitations. However, even with these limitations, even though Gauda currently doesn't know the upper limit of the gem's enhancement spells, whether it can only enhance 0 ring spells, this crescent moon gem still deserves the title of priceless treasure. Because 0 ring spells, though seemingly low-ranking, were created by historically renowned archmages, rigorous and perfect, passed down for countless years without anyone being able to innovate or enhance them. One can imagine how difficult the act of enhancing spells is. What exactly are you, to have followed me into this world and possess such incredible abilities? Gauda thought to himself, simultaneously becoming increasingly concerned. A common man is innocent, but possessing a treasure is a crime. If outsiders knew he possessed such a treasure, greedy individuals would instantly overwhelm him, devising ways to kill and seize it. To say nothing of the distant past, the Mage Seda would likely be the first to kill him for the treasure. I must be extremely careful from now on, and never let slip the existence of this treasure. Fortunately, this gem had already taken root in his magical cosmos. As long as he didn't actively publicize it, who would suspect he possessed such a precious treasure? Moreover, because of the gem's existence, Gauda saw for the first time a tiny glimmer of hope to escape his current perilous situation, purchasing powerful spell recipes, mastering new spells, and then strengthening those spells with a gem. Perhaps there was a slight possibility that he could directly confront the Mage Seda. Looking at the magnificent gem in his magical cosmos, Gauda decided to give it a name. After all, it wasn't just a simple gem, not merely one in appearance. Its essence is some kind of magical treasure, and it should have a name. Looking at the crescent-shaped gem, and recalling its magical effect, akin to game cheat code, a perfect name suddenly popped into his head. I'll call you Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Gauda suppressed his excitement, acting as if nothing had happened, cleaned up the little gray mouse's corpse, and then went to the restaurant for lunch. The afternoon was still work time. The daily work in the herb garden mainly involved cultivating and processing herbs, and concocting simple potions for the Mage Seda. While these were called simple potions, only 3 people were truly capable of doing the job. Everything requires talent. And Gauda was the strongest among all the apprentices. Therefore, he was fortunate enough to have his own workshop. Of course, he learned all this from Amy, and even his workshop was pointed out to him by Amy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to find it. Gauda's workshop wasn't large, just a long work table with many tools needed for concocting potions. On one side of the workbench was a foot-operated bellows, a furnace, and several suspended crucibles of varying sizes. The bellows were used to control the heat. It was said that advanced potion makers use magic for heating, which was not only convenient but also allowed for more precise control. At the other end of the workbench was a large shelf, with rows of raw materials for concocting potions, stored in various containers. After carefully surveying the familiar yet unfamiliar environment, Gauda took a deep breath. Let's begin. His afternoon task was to concoct a basic spider venom potion. Just as alchemists, weapon refiners, and array masters were considered the 3 pillars of secondary professions in fantasy novels, while many magic-related disciplines existed in this world, such as puppetry and scroll studies, these were considered minor paths. The most recognized disciplines were always alchemy, potion making, and the most mysterious runeology. Alchemy could be compared to weapon refinement, and potion making was even easier to understand. Alchemy. As for runic arts, based on his previous knowledge, he didn't really have a corresponding understanding of this discipline. But in short, potion making, as one of the 3 major disciplines, is a very profound subject, far more complex than what Gauda had seen in some Western movies and TV shows, simply putting all the ingredients into a pot in order and boiling them. First, before concocting a potion, the required materials must be enchanted. Enchanting releases the properties of the materials, and through the precise control of the potion master, makes them more consistent with the potion's requirements. This is a very important step, and also extremely difficult. Most apprentices are unable to concoct potions because they get stuck at this step. Gauda narrowed his eyes, recalling all the details in his mind. 1 snake fang grass, 1 stalk of mountain wormwood, 1 portion of green spider pouch. Following his memory, Gauda took the main ingredients needed to concoct a basic spider venom potion from the shelf beside him. Then, he took out the snake fang grass and placed it in a seemingly ordinary wooden bowl on the table. After calming himself slightly, Gauda stared at the grayish-green snake fang grass in the wooden bowl, channeling his spiritual power, his 5 senses becoming exceptionally sharp. About 2 minutes later, something different appeared on the surface of the snake fang grass in his vision. Spiral ripples like DNA chains, sharp serrated ripples, and wave-like ripples, nearly 7 or 8 different types, were being released from the snake fang grass in a peculiar yet regular pattern. Gauda knew that these ripples were the manifestation of the snake fang grass's many properties. The snake fang grass wasn't a rare herb, but it still possessed 7 or 8 medicinal properties. Of course, he only needed one of the poisonous properties to concoct his basic spider venom potion. Gauda's face was solemn. He reached out and touched the snake fang grass in the wooden bowl, simultaneously extending his magical power, concentrating it in his palm. then climbing along his fingers to the surface of the snake fang grass, continuously flowing into the sharp serrated ripples, as if recharging it. Thus, all the ripples except for the sharp, serrated ones representing the poison of the snake fang grass ceased releasing at that moment. It seemed that the stillness of the other ripples allowed the sharp, serrated ripples more room to expand, and with Gada's charging, its volume suddenly nearly doubled. But the stillness only lasted a moment. Soon, the remaining ripples were released again from the snake fang grass, squeezing the space that the sharp, serrated ripples had originally occupied. However, the serrated ripples were powerful, and these returning ripples could only reclaim a small portion of their territory. Most of the space remained firmly occupied by the serrated ripples. Seeing that the task was complete, Gada, whose nerves had been taut, finally breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that the demonization of the snake fang grass was finished, and silently withdrew his magic power. The entire demonization process, from beginning to end, took less than a minute, but it consumed a considerable amount of Gada's mental and magical energy. Snake fang grass was just an ordinary herb without any rank. One can imagine how much mental and magical power is needed to enchant higher-ranking herbs. No wonder it's said that a powerful alchemist is also a powerful mage. Although this was Gada's first time performing enchantment, his predecessor had done it many times before, and muscle memory ensured he made no mistakes. With this experience, enchanting the remaining materials was much easier. Soon, all the materials were enchanted, completing the first step. The next step was to process the materials. Chapter 10 Extraordinary Talent. Snake tooth grass needs to be ground into powder. Artemisia needs to be boiled. Add a large cup of water, 8 ounces, to a crucible and boil until only 1 ounce remains, then use that 1 ounce of liquid. God estimated that 1 ounce is roughly equivalent to 30 milliliters in his world. The green spider sac is much simpler to process, just puncture it and extract the venom. God used his mage's hands for this step. While green spider venom is primarily paralyzing, it also has some corrosive properties, and getting it on your hands could be troublesome. After all the materials were processed, the final step was to combine the medicinal properties of all the ingredients, the most crucial step in concocting the potion. God took a deep breath, took a conical potion bottle from the shelf on the table, and skillfully poured the boiled artemisia into the bottle, then added 5 ounces of honey water. He gently shook the potion bottle, and once the liquid inside was completely mixed, he quickly poured in most of the grayish-green powder ground from snake fang grass. As soon as the snake fang grass powder was added, the liquid in the bottle began to boil violently, its color gradually changing. Gada released his mental energy again, staring intently at the potion bottle. Strange ripples reappeared in his vision. This time, however, the ripples were constantly intertwining and changing. He carefully observed the changes in the ripples, adding snake fang grass powder as needed, striving to control the final state of the ripples to take the shape he desired. There couldn't be too much or too little snake fang grass powder, he had to find the right balance. If too much was added, he needed to immediately add a little honey water to neutralize it. If too little was added, he needed to immediately replenish it. This process, in essence, was like adding flour to water if there was too much, and adding water to flour if there was too much. However, it wasn't so easy in practice. On one hand, Gada needed to concentrate his mental energy to observe the changes in the ripples. On the other hand, he needed an absolute understanding of the properties of the materials, knowing exactly how much to add under what circumstances. After nearly failing several times due to misjudging the amount of snake fang herb powder, Gada finally calmed down from his frantic efforts, and the potion preparation was nearing completion. As the last drop of green spider venom was added to the bottle, the churning liquid gradually calmed down. A faint gray-green magical light flashed across the liquid. This was a sign of successful preparation of the basic spider venom potion. If one possessed the magic spell, detection magic, this magical light could be seen again in the potion. Looking at the slightly greenish liquid in the bottle, Gada felt a surge of accomplishment and pride. The basic spider venom potion, a level 0 potion, had a strong paralyzing effect but was not lethal. It was usually bought to coat arrows for use against wild beasts. He eagerly took 3 smaller, cone-shaped potion bottles from a nearby shelf and poured the freshly prepared basic spider venom into them. A standard recipe for basic spider venom potion can be divided into 3 smaller vials for sale. This method is more profitable for potion makers and more acceptable to buyers. However, after filling the 3 smaller vials, Gauda was surprised to find that his large vial still contained about half an ounce of potion. According to his memory, a standard recipe for basic spider venom potion should only yield about 3 small vials, and each small vial should be about 2 ounces. How could there be so much left? Unless, a thought flashed through Gauda's mind. In the next instant, he immediately began searching his small workshop. Finally, Gauda pulled out a wooden box from the bottom shelf. Inside the box were 3 small vials of basic spider venom potion, 6 gold coins gleaming with an alluring luster, and dozens of loose silver and copper coins. Gauda's heart pounded. Without a doubt, this was a huge sum of money. In this world's monetary system, the most basic currency was copper coins. Here, the actual purchasing power of 1 copper coin is equivalent to 4 yuan, plus a few cents from Gauda's previous life. The second tier of the monetary system is silver coins. 1 silver coin is equal to 12 copper coins, or about 50 yuan in purchasing power. Gold coins are at the very top of the monetary system. 1 gold coin can be exchanged for 20 silver coins, with an actual purchasing power of around 1,000 yuan. Furthermore, silver and copper coins are not necessarily interchangeable between different countries due to differences in minting methods, materials, and national strength, and their actual purchasing power varies considerably across regions. However, gold coins, being directly linked to gold, do not have these problems. They are universally accepted and their value remains relatively consistent. Gauda picked up a gold coin with a captivating luster. Its shimmering light was almost dazzling, causing him to squint and fall in love with it. He was in the Duchy of Xinan. The gold coins currently used in the Duchy of Xinan are officially called Xinan gold coins, a name that is easy to understand. The obverse of the Sinan gold coin features the face of the founding Duke of Sinan, while the reverse depicts a proud and spirited rooster, hence its nickname Clucking Rooster or Little Rooster. "What an adorable little rooster," Gauda exclaimed, admiring the exquisite rooster design on the reverse of the Sinan gold coin. This wasn't greed, he simply loved chickens. He justified himself inwardly. After admiring the charming little rooster for several seconds, Gauda picked up a silver coin. The obverse of the Sinan Duchy's silver coin also featured the founding duke's face, but the reverse featured a 3-leaf flower, hence its name, the 3-leaf flower silver coin. Gauda carefully counted them, a total of 6 gold coins, 7 silver coins, and 14 copper coins. This was equivalent to 6,400 yuan before his transmigration. It didn't seem like much. However, it's important to understand that in this world, a family of 5 typically needs only 57 gold coins a year for basic living expenses, even with rent to pay. If they own their own house, the annual cost can be reduced to less than 45 gold coins. For a beggar-turned apprentice to accumulate such a large sum under such high pressure is absolutely incredible. After all, apprentices work for the Mage Seda without any compensation. The previous owner didn't retain any memories of the source of this money, but Gauda now understood everything. Both the remaining half-ounce of potion and the 3 small vials of basic spider venom potion neatly arranged in the wooden box told a story. The previous owner was a gifted genius. A genius in the field of potions. With a systematic instruction, in less than a year, he was able to produce an extra half-ounce of basic spider venom potion by mixing it according to the standard formula. In other words, for every 4 portions of basic spider venom potion mixed, there was 1 extra small vial of basic spider venom potion belonging to Gauda. All of this was built upon the predecessor's precise grasp of the properties of materials and the outstanding effect of material transformation, which was a manifestation of the predecessor's talent, and Gauda inherited all of these. Chapter 11 Phil's Potion Shop. Genius wasn't an unfamiliar compliment to Gauda. Everyone around him had praised him that way since childhood. But his genius lay in mathematics, which seemed less relevant in the magical world. His predecessor's genius in potions was what truly mattered. The price the Mage Seda could get for a set, 3 small vials, of basic spider venom potions was 2 gold. This was based on the premise that Seda had sufficient strength and could consistently produce the potions. Selling on a small scale himself obviously wouldn't fetch that price, but it wouldn't be much lower either, and the advantage was pure profit with no costs. What a pity, Gauda couldn't help but sigh. Besides his outstanding talent in potions, his predecessor was also far more cunning than the average person. Gauda wasn't the only one who remained clear-headed in this environment. His predecessor was also such a person. Like Gauda, he wasn't content to passively await his predetermined fate, but instead tried to change it. He began preparing to escape his predicament early on and miraculously found a breakthrough with his talent. With enough money, it's not impossible to find a way to break the tracking mark. Unfortunately, he hadn't had time to save enough before he was chosen by the Mage Seda to test the medicine. Time was of the essence. If he had been given more time, perhaps he could have created his own miracle. Since I've been given a second chance, I will definitely succeed this time. With the savings left by his predecessor, the newly acquired right to freely enter and leave the herb garden, and win Spirit Moon Shadow, that previously faint hope finally began to glimmer. After a standard dinner of rye bread and pea soup, before nightfall, God, carrying a full package, left the herb garden with Amy. The package contained 5 sets of basic spider venom potions, which he was going to deliver to the potion shop in the city. This task, originally belonging to Elon, had been handed over to him after he killed Elon. Because of the tracking mark, Master Seda wasn't worried about his apprentices escaping. Generally, he didn't restrict their movements. To save trouble, he even entrusted the potion delivery to Elon. Of course, Master Seda negotiated the price himself, and Elon was only responsible for delivery. Master Seda's potion garden was located in the suburbs of Hogan City. Establishing a potion garden required a large and fertile plot of land. As a potion master, Master Seda had many ways to make money, but his expenses were also enormous, so he couldn't be extravagant. Therefore, even in a place like Hogan City, which was equivalent to an unknown small county town in his previous life, Master Seda could only choose to locate his potion garden in the suburbs where land was cheaper. The place Gata was going to was Hogan City's commercial district. In most cases, a city's commercial district is located in the best part of the city. Hogan City was no exception. Its commercial district was located in the very center of the city. Even though Hogan City wasn't large, the location of the potion garden was indeed remote. From the herb garden to the commercial district, it would take about an hour to walk. A round trip would take about 2 hours. Before his transmigration, Gata had many modes of transportation for this distance: subway, bus, even taxi. He would never have considered walking. But here, he only had one mode of transportation: his own 2 legs. Although carriages still existed in this world, the problem was that carriage rental started at 2 silver coins per hour, with an additional 6 copper coins for every 5 minutes thereafter. Only a mage like Seda could afford to ride at such a price. It was irrelevant to apprentices like them. Gata's first impression of Hogan City could be summed up in 3 words: extremely dilapidated. The roads were winding and poorly planned, and most were very narrow. Due to the rain a couple of days ago, many sections of the roads were flooded with dirty water, and litter was everywhere. A sense of confinement and crowding was overwhelming. Most of the pedestrians he encountered were in a hurry, as if they had some urgent business. Gata knew that most of these pedestrians were factory workers in the city, who needed to get home before dark to finish their chores and go to bed as quickly as possible to save on kerosene costs. As they entered the slums on the outskirts of Hogan City, the stench in the air grew increasingly pervasive. Along the roadside, they saw many ragged, unemployed temporary workers and homeless beggars. Gata and Amy also came from here. It was chaotic, poor, and crowded. There were also many thieves. Gata instinctively tightened his grip on the drawstring of his bundle, bent slightly, and quickened his pace, following Amy as they traversed the chaotic streets. Although he was barely a magic apprentice, possessing 2 spells, neither was offensive. They were primarily functional. Coupled with his not-so-strong physique, Gata had to proceed with caution. This was why Gata had brought Amy along. His predecessor had left him only with knowledge. His current situation was essentially that of someone with amnesia. In other words, he didn't know his way around. As they walked on, the stench in the air gradually faded, and the houses on both sides became much brighter. Only then did Gata straighten his back and look straight ahead. They were now in the working-class residential area of Hogan City. Passing through this area would lead them to the commercial district. After walking for about 20 more minutes, Gata finally arrived at the commercial district before dark. Hogan City's commercial district was very bustling. Because it was already dark, the streetlights on both sides of the road weren't already on. All the streetlights here were magic crystal lamps, powered by a strange crystal called magic crystal, which was much brighter than kerosene lamps. In the same city, only 30 or 40 minutes apart, one side was reluctant to turn on the lights at night to save a little money on kerosene, while on this side, the more expensive magic crystal lamps were lit all night long. It was as if they were 2 different worlds. The streets of the commercial district were very wide and very clean. Various tempting aromas wafted from the upscale restaurants on both sides of the road. Passing by a bakery called Panda Bakery, the sweet aroma wafting from the freshly baked pastries and cookies made Gouda and Amy, who had been eating rye bread all day, instinctively swallow. However, the prices listed outside the bakery forced them to walk past without even glancing at it. The cheapest maple syrup cookies cost 6 copper coins for a small portion. The pedestrians on the street were all dressed elegantly, though the men's clothing was rather monochromatic, mostly brown and black, while the ladies' dresses were much more vibrant, with various colors and ornate decorations. Amy had already bent down slightly again, lowered her head, and quickened her pace, just as she had done in the slums. But it was different. Gouda, on the other hand, was observing his surroundings with great interest, taking in this exotic scene he would never have seen in his previous life. Following the house number, Amy led Gouda to their destination, Phil's Potion Shop, a medium-sized shop occupying addresses 18, 19, and 20 on the street had a large sign, and a watermark stood at the entrance. Phil's Potion Shop is recruiting diligent herb gatherers. The harvest season for thorn grass is approaching. Because this herb grows high in the mountains, the harvesting period is extremely short, and the demand is high. We urgently need to hire 5-10 temporary herb gatherers who are physically strong and hard-working. This job requires going out into the mountains, camping in the wild, and following the instructions of our apothecary. Payment will be based on the quantity and quality of the herbs gathered. The shop will provide necessary outdoor equipment and food. Interested parties please come to the shop for an interview as soon as possible. It was a job posting for general laborers. Thorn grass, a herb with small thorns on its surface, is used to restore physical strength. Dried thorn grass is often used as an adjunct in the preparation of stamina-restoring potions. Stamina recovery potions are among the best-selling low-tier potions, so during the thorn grass harvesting season, pharmacies typically collect them in large quantities, then dry and preserve them to ensure a stable supply throughout the year. Herbal knowledge about thorn grass flashed through Gouda's mind. He looked away from the signboard and strode into Phil's Potion Shop. This was the supplier arranged by the Mage Seda. Since the details had already been agreed upon, and it wasn't their first collaboration, plus Gouda was only responsible for delivery, the transaction went smoothly. He entered the shop, identified himself and explained his purpose, handed 5 sets of basic spider venom potions to the clerk, and received a receipt stamped with Phil's Potion Shop's seal, thus completing his mission. The money didn't pass through Gouda's hands. Every so often, the Mage Seda would come back with a receipt to collect payment. Gouda. After leaving Phil's Potion Shop, Amy noticed Gouda looking around, seemingly searching for something. Gouda snapped out of his reverie. The basic spider venom potion belonging to the Mage Seda had already been sold, but his own batch of basic spider venom potions remained quietly in his bag. Gouda didn't remember where his predecessor had sold these potions, but that wasn't a big deal. He could find a new channel. Amy, I want to wander around a bit more. You should go back first, he said, turning to Amy. Amy was taken aback, then instinctively said, it's so late. There aren't any magic lamps in the slums. Gouda thought about it and realized she was right. This world was different from his previous one. Safety couldn't be guaranteed, especially in places like the slums. Traveling in groups was always safer. He pulled 6 copper coins from his pocket and stuffed them into Amy's hand. Wait for me outside Panda Bakery. I'll come find you after I'm done shopping, and then we'll go back together. God, Amy wasn't surprised that Gouda had money. Instead, she reassured him. Now that Master Seda's potion has succeeded, we should be able to live a peaceful life. You're the most talented among us. You'll definitely be valued by Master Seda. Are you sure? God wasn't surprised that Amy knew anything, but he asked in return. After all, they lived under the same roof. It would be strange if Amy knew nothing. I guess so, Amy stammered, sounding very guilty. Clearly, she knew Master Seda's character, but subconsciously she was deceiving herself. I killed Elon. I've already offended Master Seda. Besides, no matter what, things can't get any worse, right? God said, then turned and left. I'll be back to find you soon. Chapter 12 Spell Recipes. After confirming that Amy hadn't followed, Gouda wandered the streets, searching for a suitable shop. Besides often being located in the city center, a city's commercial district typically develops around the Lord's mansion, church, or market square. Hogan City was no exception, with its commercial district built around the city square. While conforming to developmental patterns, the street layout of Hogan City's commercial district was actually quite chaotic, lacking unified planning. There was only one main road, running north-south, leading to the city square. Several side streets formed numerous narrow alleys. Because of low foot traffic, the rent for shops in these alleys was correspondingly low, thus hiding many small businesses and workshops. After navigating several alleys, Gada finally found his target. It was a general store, much simpler and more secluded than the grand facades of other large shops. A simple wooden sign stood at the already humble entrance. A few words were hastily written on the sign: Pierre's General Store, selling all kinds of finished potions, holy water, herbs, and herb seeds, selling all kinds of materials and ores, including magic crystals, selling all kinds of low-level magical ornaments and amulets, also offering item recycling and treasure appraisal services. Looking at the small, workshop-like wooden sign, Gada nodded slightly. This was exactly what he needed. When Gada entered the general store, the owner, Pierre, was curled up in a recliner behind the counter, resting with his eyes half open. It was clear that the general store wasn't doing very well. Take a look at what you need. Just because something isn't on the shelf doesn't mean we don't have it. Some items are in the warehouse in the back. Pierre, an elderly man who clearly heard Gada's footsteps, greeted him casually without even looking up. Gada glanced around and found that although the items were numerous and disorganized, they were quite tidy. I saw on the wooden sign at the door that it says item recycling. Do you accept everything? Gada asked directly. Of course not, Pierre shook his head, still showing no intention of getting up. This is a general store, not a junkyard. Everything has to have some value. What about potions? Gada asked, browsing the shelves. There were many kinds, but they were all rank 0 potions. Let's take a look. Pierre showed some interest, finally opening his half-closed eyes and getting up from the recliner. Basic spider venom potions weren't rare treasures, there was no need to hide them. Gada immediately took 3 small vials of basic spider venom potions from his bag and placed them on the counter. Basic spider venom potions, a glint flashed in Pierre's eyes, the sign of casting the detect magic spell, and he nodded. The glow is bright, the quality is good, mastering a spell makes one a mage apprentice, so the shopkeeper was at least a mage apprentice, and given his age, even with poor talent, his strength was definitely higher than Gada's. Gada muttered to himself. My usual purchase price for a set of basic spider venom potions is 30 silver. Yours is of good quality, so I'll add 1 silver per small bottle, making it 33 silver for a set, Pierre quoted directly. It was a very reasonable price. The long-term purchase price negotiated by the Mage Seda was only 40 silver, 2 gold. Deal, Gada said, quite satisfied, and readily agreed. After the exchange of money and goods, Gada didn't leave. Is there anything else you need? Pierre asked proactively. Gada approached the counter and lowered his voice. Do you have any spell recipes for sale? A moment of silence. In Shan, the private trading of spell recipes is strictly prohibited, Pierre said, his politeness fading, his face becoming expressionless. In fact, not only in the Duchy of Shan, but almost every country on the continent had similar regulations, classifying spell recipes as controlled items and restricting the private trade. Mages who wanted to buy spell recipes could only go to the official Mage Association or certain officially permitted mage organizations. There were many reasons for this. In the world before Gaod's transmigration, regulated items generally fell into 3 categories. First, those with powerful lethality that could pose a significant threat to public order, such as firearms, ammunition, and controlled knives. Second, items that infringe on intellectual property rights, including pirated software and audio-visual products. Third, items that offer exorbitant profits but may cause harm, the most typical example being tobacco. Spell recipes, however, met all 3 criteria. First, they allowed buyers to master powerful or destructive spells, equivalent to firearms and ammunition, or even more so. Second, spell recipes were extremely profitable. Essentially, they were just a piece of paper with some text, costing almost nothing, yet selling for astronomical prices. A level 0 spell recipe averaged 6 gold, a profit margin of hundreds or even thousands of times, while a level 1 spell recipe averaged a staggering 25 gold. This was because what was being sold was knowledge, the paper was merely the medium. Finally, spell recipes were too easily forged, private transactions could not guarantee their authenticity. The proliferation of counterfeit spell recipes would severely harm an entire nation. These recipes are called spell recipes because mastering magic requires not only diligent practice and talent, but also the consumption of corresponding potions. Therefore, a complete spell recipe includes not only a spell description, a spell model, and casting techniques, but also the corresponding potion recipe. Buying a counterfeit recipe would result in counterfeit potions, leading not only to financial ruin but also a high probability of death from consuming them. For all these reasons, countries strictly control spell recipes, which increases national revenue, maintains market order, protects the intellectual property of mages, and prevents the proliferation of spells, a win-win-win situation. Of course, even with strict controls, completely prohibiting the private trade of spell recipes is impossible. The act of trading itself is difficult to verify. For example, a mage teaching his apprentices magic tricks is clearly not a trade and is permitted. Therefore, many private transactions of spell recipes, without evidence, can be considered as instruction, and who can stop you? Of course, in most cases, mages would rather buy spell recipes from official channels at high prices than engage in private transactions, even if the price is much cheaper. Official recipes may be expensive, but they guarantee authenticity. Who can guarantee the authenticity of recipes from other sources? After all, counterfeiting recipes is too easy, anyone can do it, and the materials needed for potions are often much more expensive than the recipe itself. Trying to save a little money by buying a fake recipe, only to waste even more money buying materials to concoct a fake potion, is simply not worth it. Chapter 13 New Spells. Private trading of level 0 spell recipes isn't uncommon, and the authorities usually turn a blind eye to it, don't they? Gauda understood these principles, but he didn't abandon his idea and persisted. Level 0 spells are special, they don't require potions to learn, hence they're called tricks and not considered spells. This makes private trading of spell recipes at this level much more common. The cost of trial and error is lower. Pierre narrowed his eyes, remaining silent, seemingly considering. If you agree, I can add 10 more 3-leaf silver coins to each spell recipe. Gauda raised his stake. He desperately needed to master new spells. New spells with lethal power. Crisis could strike at any moment, he had to strengthen himself and find ways to prepare trump cards so he would have room to fight back. Private transactions of level 0 spell recipes are indeed commonplace, but I'm running a business, after all. I can't be sure of your intentions. You might say you want to trade with me, but then turn around and report me. Although both parties would be punished in that case, you would at most pay a fine and be imprisoned for a period of time, while my shop would be forced to close down. I can't afford to take that risk, Pierre said calmly, shaking his head under God's gaze. While private transactions of spell recipes are rampant, they are primarily conducted between individuals. Pierre and God had only just met, and there was no trust between them whatsoever. The consequences they would face were unequal, so Pierre's refusal was understandable. Before Gauda could be completely disappointed, Pierre spoke up again. Although I won't make this deal with you, however, Gauda's eyes lit up. Seeing Pierre's hesitant expression, he instantly understood. If you can provide any reliable channels, I can pay you for it. Seeing Gauda's cooperative attitude, Pierre nodded in satisfaction. I have a customer who's currently a bit short on cash and wanted to sell me some spell formulas, but I refused. I can act as a go-between. As for the specifics of the transaction, you'll have to discuss it yourselves. Any problems that arise are not my responsibility. Gauda pursed his lips, pondered for a moment, and nodded. Of course, then I'll trouble you, shopkeeper. He knew there were risks involved, but he had no other choice. Hogan City was just a small city, there was no official Mage association there, so Gauda couldn't purchase spell formulas through legitimate channels and had to resort to private transactions. This customer usually comes to me every 10 days or so. The last time he came was 8 or 9 days ago. How about this? Come back to the shop again in 5 days before the evening prayer, Pierre said. The evening prayer was at 5 in the afternoon. Gauda had no objection. Knowledge is truly an expensive thing. Gauda sighed inwardly as he left Pierre's general store. He had already paid the price of 10 3-leaf silver coins without even seeing the spell recipe, just to get Pierre's help. But at least he had gained something, he only needed to wait 5 more days. Thinking about obtaining a new spell recipe in 5 days, God couldn't help but feel a little excited. Having been in this world for less than a day, he had already begun to experience the wonders of magic. How many people wouldn't yearn for such supernatural power? He walked along the alley towards the main street of the commercial district. It was getting late. He needed to hurry and meet up with Amy before returning to the herb garden. God hurried along, but his mind was scattered, muttering to himself. Whether it was his inexplicable arrival in this world, the current crisis, or the wonder of magic, everything had greatly shaken him, forcing him to think deeply. The next 5 days passed uneventfully. While God remained constantly on edge, he gradually became familiar with life in the herb garden. But this familiarity didn't bring him peace of mind. As time passed, he only grew more restless. Knowing that the next drug trial was essentially his death sentence, knowing that the next trial was coming soon, yet not being able to pinpoint the exact time, this agonizing feeling was something only those who had experienced it could understand. The fact that God hadn't broken down or gone mad, and was still alive and actively seeking a way to survive, could only be attributed to his strong will, perhaps honed by his decades-long battle with math problems in his previous life. New magic, and a new source. Gouda knew this was his only chance of survival. However, while the new magic offered hope, the new source left Gouda at a loss. Zero-ring creatures are hard to find, and zero-ring scum like the little gray mouse, possessing the bloodline of a ley-line creature to reach zero-ring rank but lacking any combat power, are extremely rare. Even a mage apprentice like Yilin, who Gouda had to kill with a night raid, was actually among the weakest in terms of combat power among zero-ring creatures. While pondering, he dripped the last drop of green spider venom into the potion bottle. With a flash of inspiration, a high-quality, basic spider venom potion was ready. Gouda put away the potion, tidied up the utensils on the table, and then took out a wooden box from under the shelf. He opened the box, revealing gold, silver, and yellow. Inside was all his savings. 6 gold, 30 silver, and 8 copper. Approximately 7,500 yuan. Gouda quickly calculated in his mind, thought for a moment, took out all his savings, put them in his pocket, making it cumbersome, then put the wooden box back in its place, slowly got up, and pushed open the door to leave. His afternoon work was finished. Next came his free time. He'd just stepped outside when he bumped into Amy. She clearly hadn't expected Gouda to be out at this hour instead of in his workshop mixing potions, but she quickly realized what was happening. "Gouda, are you going to the city?" Gouda nodded, not bothering to hide his whereabouts. After Elon's death, he had the freedom to enter and leave the herb garden, no longer needing to conceal his presence. Watching Gouda's figure disappear into the shadows of the herb garden corridor and then be enveloped by the light outside, Amy stood there for a long time, stunned. 5 days had passed. This time, Gouda had brought all his wealth into the city, solely to buy spell recipes. Leaving the herb garden, with his previous experience, and with it being daytime and his eagerness, Gouda navigated the area smoothly, arriving at Hogan City's commercial district in less than 40 minutes. This wasn't his first time in the commercial district, and in his previous life, this so-called bustling commercial district wasn't even as prosperous as a small town's commercial street. But after spending so much time in the oppressive herb garden, the bright and spacious commercial area still gave Gouda a sense of longing and vitality. His purpose was clear. He followed the address directly to Pierre's general store, hidden deep in an alley. Gouda strode into the store, and just like the first time, the owner, Pierre, was reclining in a deck chair, only now, unlike 5 days ago, the empty store had a stranger in it. This was a man in his 30s, with a thin, long face, sparse stubble giving him a slightly weathered look, and dressed in clothes made of fine linen. Although his back was to Gouda, and he didn't even glance at him, Pierre seemed to have eyes in the back of his head. Even as Gouda was sizing up the man, Pierre stood up and said, "You've finally arrived. Yam has been waiting for you for almost an hour. If you hadn't come, I wouldn't have been able to keep him here." The man's name was Yam. He was the customer Pierre had introduced to Gouda for the magic formula transaction. It took a while to get here. Gouda apologized to Pierre, glancing at Yam without immediately speaking to him. In transactions, if you can't guarantee you'll have the upper hand, wait for the other party to speak first. This will only make them unsure of your capabilities. This was a little trick I'd used. Yam clearly lacked experience in this area. Knowing that Gouda was the one who wanted to buy his spell formula, he eagerly scrutinized Gouda with a suspicious look. "So you want to buy the spell formula?" Gouda's simple clothes and still somewhat childish appearance obviously made Yam doubt his financial resources. "No one would pay 10 shamrocks just to joke around," Gouda said calmly, spreading his hands. God paid the 10 shamrock silver coins as a commission. Yam stared into God's eyes for a few seconds, then, after a moment of silence, calmly pulled a yellow parchment from his pocket and handed it to God. These are the spell recipes I'm selling. Take a look. Spell recipes are about selling knowledge, so naturally, the recipes wouldn't be shown to Gauda before a deal is struck. The paper contains spell recipe entries and descriptions of their corresponding effects. Customers would choose their desired spells based on these descriptions, then exchange money for the spell. This is the most common process for spell recipe transactions. Even purchasing spell recipes through official channels follows the same procedure. Chapter 14 New Spells. Gauda took the yellow parchment from Yam and quickly scanned the information on it. The spell list contained 5 level 0 spells. Acid Splash Conjuration, level 0, launches a small ball of acid at the target, with an initial maximum range of 25 feet, approximately 8.5 meters. You must make a successful ranged contact attack to hit the target. The acid ball deals strong acid damage. The acid from the ball disappears after a few seconds. Increase resistance protection, level 0, infuses mana into the target, which can be yourself, to increase the target's spell resistance, reducing the amount of spell damage and spell effects they receive. One cast lasts for 1 minute. Blade Protection, level 0, draws a protective mark in the air, granting resistance to blunt, piercing, and slashing damage from weapon attacks. Freezing Ray Evocation, level 0, launches a cold, blue-white ray at the target as a ranged spell attack, with an initial maximum range of 25 feet. If it hits, the target will suffer freezing damage and be slowed. Reading Magic, Prophecy, 0 rings. You can decipher magical text on items, books, scrolls, weapons, etc., that cannot be deciphered by other means. Such deciphering usually does not release the magic contained in these texts. Furthermore, once this spell has been cast and a piece of magical text has been deciphered, the same text can be understood again without needing to resort to reading magic. How is it? Satisfied, God forcefully suppressed his excitement, looking up expressionlessly. Satisfied, very satisfied. How could he not be satisfied? The list of spells provided by Yam not only included the most needed offensive spells, but 2 of them. However, the most important principle of a transaction is not to let others see your satisfaction with a traded item, otherwise, you'll inevitably be met with a price gouging. 1 or 2 spells are acceptable, barely meeting my needs, but the number of spell recipes is a bit low, God replied, half praising, half criticizing. Not bad. To master all 5 spells, a mage apprentice would need at least 1 or 2 years, Yam muttered. Gauda ignored Yam's grumbling and cut to the chase. How much are you asking for a spell recipe? 3 little roosters. Yam held up 3 fingers. Too expensive. I'll only offer 1 gold coin per spell recipe. Gauda frowned slightly, reducing Yam's offer by more than half. In the official Mage Guild, the average price for a level 0 spell recipe is 6 gold, Yam immediately emphasized. You said it yourself, that's the official price. If your price isn't significantly better than the official price, why should I buy a spell recipe from you? It's against the rules and involves a huge risk. After all, who knows if the spell recipe you're selling me is genuine? 2 gold and 10 silver. Yam paused again for a moment before finally speaking. I'm a native of Hogan City, I'm right here, I can't run away, so at least there's some guarantee regarding the authenticity of the recipe, far superior to what you can get from any random exchange. Gauda glanced at Pierre, who had been watching the whole thing unfold. Pierre, a shrewd man, nodded and said, Yam is indeed from Hogan. He's lived in Hogan for many years and has never left. Gauda's heart skipped a beat. If Pierre wasn't lying, then the authenticity of the formulas Yam possessed was indeed somewhat guaranteed. After all, a monk can run away, but his temple can't. Yam wouldn't flee his homeland for a deal worth less than 10 Shan gold coins. From that perspective, a slightly higher price wasn't unacceptable. Sell me the 3 spell formulas as a package. 1 price, 6 gold coins. 2 gold and 10 silver coins was already Gauda's target price, but he chose to continue bargaining. My price is already the lowest I can offer, Yam said through gritted teeth. That's a pity. Gauda shook his head, decisively returning the list to Yam, and immediately turned to walk out of the shop, his expression perfectly calm, but his heart filled with tension. Would he call him back? He knew perfectly well that if he missed Yam, it would be difficult to find someone willing to trade spell formulas with him again in a short time. Unfortunately, Time was exactly what Gauda was short of right now. He was also short on cash, so he had to be frugal wherever possible. After all, this was just an experiment. Gauda was prepared that if Yam didn't stop him before he left Pierre's general store, he would immediately turn back with a defeated smile. "All right, sir, 2 gold and 10 silver, you win." Face can't put food on the table, but the 30 silver saved could buy many meals. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Gauda was about to walk out of Pierre's general store when Yam's slightly dejected voice finally came from behind. "Wait." Gauda turned around and looked at Yam. "All right, just 6 gold coins, you win. If I weren't short on cash lately." Brilliant. His first negotiation, whether in his past life or this one, was so successful. He truly had a special talent. Gauda praised himself inwardly, then put on a calm smile. "Sir, this should be called a win-win situation." He was genuinely in a good mood, so his smile was heartfelt. "Which 3 spell recipes do you want?" Yam asked. Acid Splash, Freezing Ray, and Increased Resistance. God had already made his decision. With his current resources, 3 spell recipes were the limit. First, 2 offensive spells were a must. Of the remaining 3, Reading Magic could be ruled out for now, not that it was worse than the others, but God didn't need it at the moment. He needed spells that could enhance his combat power. As for Blade Protection and Increased Resistance, both spells belonged to the defensive category, just targeting different types of damage, namely magic resistance and physical resistance. Considering the Mage Sadar as the hypothetical enemy, Increased Resistance was undoubtedly more suitable. An old mage wouldn't pull out a longsword to fight you with bayonets, would he? Although the price was 30 silver coins less than expected, the 6 gold coin price was clearly within Yam's acceptable range. He readily took out 3 thin booklets from his person, the 3 spell recipes Gauda had chosen. With the money exchanged for the goods, Gauda took out 6 gold coins from his pocket and completed the transaction with Yam. After receiving the money, Yam said goodbye to Pierre and left first. He had been waiting for Gauda in the shop for a long time and was eager to get back. "Thank you for your trouble, Mr. Pierre," a satisfied Gauda thanked Pierre. "It's only fair to do business for money. You don't need to be so polite. On the contrary, I'll need your patronage for my small business," Pierre said with a smile. 10 clover silver coins weren't a big deal for him, but it was just a matter of saying a few words. And he could make a profit without having to put in any other effort. Pierre was naturally very happy to do so. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Spell Models. Gauda returned to the herb garden laden with 3 spell recipes, arriving just in time for the evening meal break. Suppressing his eagerness, he forced down the already unpalatable and tiresome classic 2-piece set, rye bread and pea soup, before heading to his workshop. Evenings were the apprentices' training time, free for them to do as they pleased, and no one would disturb him. Gauda took out the 3 spell recipes from his robes, and after a moment's thought, first opened the recipe for Acid Splash. A spell model composed of lines and graphs came into view, with 9 nodes. At first glance, the model resembled a 3-dimensional constellation, with the official description of the spell below. The yellow paper Yam had given him contained the spell's effects, which he had copied from there. The right page showed a magnified view of the spell model and detailed textual explanations. Turning to the next page revealed another magnified view and corresponding textual explanations. The spell model itself wasn't particularly complex, and since it didn't require the use of a specific potion, the potion recipe was omitted, making the entire spellbook only 5 pages long. In just a few minutes, Gauda quickly skimmed through it. Of course, that wasn't enough. The first step in establishing a spell model was memorizing it. Normal mage apprentices would struggle with this first step for a day or two. Gauda's memory was exceptionally strong, and his predecessor's memory was also quite good. It seemed that 1 + 1 was greater than 2, causing his memory to go from outstanding to superhuman. In less than half an hour, he had already memorized the Acid Splash spell model. Afterward, Gauda put away the Acid Splash spell recipe, closed his eyes slightly, and quickly entered a meditative state. These 5 days of training had made Gauda increasingly adept at entering a meditative state. He immersed his mind in the world of magical stars. In the depths of his dark consciousness, Countless stars were wandering, beautiful and dazzling. To construct a spell model, one needs to use their mental power to guide and link these star particles, making them obediently stop in a specific position, and then connect them through mental energy to form a spell model. Once the spell model is completed, the mage can use magic power through the model to transform it into the corresponding spell and release it. However, these star particles are constantly moving randomly, and guiding them and fixing them at a fixed distance and direction is by no means a simple task. The spell model for Acid Splash requires a total of 9 star particles, which is not many, but not few either. In fact, 99% of magic spell models do not exceed 10 star particles. Gata began to try to construct the spell model using his mental energy, following the spell model diagram and specific route recorded on the Acid Splash spell recipe. He randomly locked onto a star particle, and his mental energy, like a snake hunting, silently approached. As the distance drew closer, Gata's mental energy suddenly swept forward, firmly locking the previously irregularly wandering star particle in place. Everything went smoothly without any unexpected incidents. With his current mental strength, controlling a single star wouldn't be a problem. However, a star isn't simply locked in place, it will continuously struggle and resist. This means that before the spell model is constructed, Gata needs to constantly use his mental strength to control the star. If any star is miscontrolled and deviates during the spell model construction process, all efforts will be in vain, and everything will have to start all over again. As the saying goes, the beginning is always the hardest, but for constructing a spell model, it's the opposite. The first star is the easiest. Because next, Gata will need to firmly suppress this first star while simultaneously diverting his mental strength and attention to lock and control the second star. The final step will involve simultaneously suppressing 8 stars while controlling the 9th star, the difficulty of which is unimaginable. And this is just one trick. The spell models for higher level first ring and second ring spells will be constructed from hundreds of stars. It's terrifying to even think about. No wonder the two most important indicators for a mage are mana and mental strength. Without mana, one cannot cast spells. Without sufficient mental strength, one cannot construct spell models, and without spell models, even with abundant mana, one still cannot cast a spell. Both are indispensable. However, this is not the problem Gata needs to consider right now. What he needs to do now is control the second star. He tried to separate a strand of mental strength, just like before, to control another star that was wandering near the first star. This time, however, it wasn't enough to simply keep the second star stationary. It needed to be moved to a specific position relative to the first star. Gata took a deep breath, and the mental strength wrapped around the first star extended outwards, becoming a straight star track, directly connecting to the second star until the 2 stars were joined. Then, following the instructions in the spell formula, Gata controlled the second star, using the location of the first star as a starting point, and began to move it. Forward 1, right 1 and a third, up 1/4. The movement of any object boils down to 2 elements, direction and distance. There are only 3 directions for a star's movement, forward and backward, left and right, and up and down. Distance, however, is directly represented by numbers, without any unit. This is because the distance between each star in a spell model is proportionally fixed. For example, if the distance between the second star and the first star in a certain direction is 2 feet, and the distance between the third star and the second star in a certain direction is 4 feet, changing it to 4 feet or 8 feet will not affect the spell model's construction. Therefore, the 1 and forward 1 is actually a proportion. The actual distances set by each person in constructing the spell model are different, but the proportion remains the same, thus ensuring the uniformity of the spell model. The star track formed by mental energy connecting the 2 stars also continuously extends and lengthens as the second star moves. Finally, the second star reaches its proper position. Gata pressed on, capturing a third star near the second star's location. Again, he used his mental energy to create a star track connecting the second and third stars, then controlled the third star to move from the second star's current position. In the magical star sea, there were nothing but stars, so there were no reference points or standards. However, the positions of each node in the magical model required absolute fixity and precision. It seemed that simply controlling the distance each star moved was an incredibly difficult task. But the reality was the opposite. In constructing a magical model, the simplest thing was actually controlling the distance the stars moved. Because the magical star sea resided deep within each person's consciousness, and within their own consciousness space, each person possessed a mechanically precise intuition regarding real-world attributes such as distance, size, direction, and mass. The real difficulty in constructing a magical model lay in controlling the movement of the stars and maintaining their stability. This was because whether moving or stationary, the stars were constantly struggling, creating enormous resistance, and the direction of this resistance was constantly changing randomly. Advance by half, advance 2/3 to the right, advance 1/2 down. Similarly, this second star track continuously extended and lengthened as the third star moved. Gauda's mind was highly focused on controlling the third star. This third star was also moving at a stable speed. However, at this moment, the star track between the second and first stars suddenly began to tremble inexplicably, and the trembling frequency increased rapidly. Then, in an instant before Gauda could react, the star track broke into violent vibrations. Without the restraint of the star track, the second star raced through the magical star sea like a wild horse. Like dominoes, the departure of the second star caused the collapse of the second star track, and the third star naturally escaped control. The first attempt to construct the acid splash spell model ended in failure. Chapter 16 Analytic Geometry and the Cartesian Coordinate System. Gauda opened his eyes and subconsciously rubbed his temples. Constructing spell models was extremely mentally taxing. His apprentice's meditation technique had reached the 5th petal stage. This level of mental strength was sufficient for him to complete the model construction for the trick, though it was somewhat strenuous. If he could cultivate to the perfect 16-petal stage, with that level of mental strength, constructing a zero-ring spell model would be much easier. The difficulty in constructing spell models lay in two aspects. First, the need for precision so extreme that even a slight error could lead to disastrous results, and second, the need for the mage to possess sufficient mental energy to sustain repeated attempts. With Gauda's current mental strength, attempting to construct a model for the acid splash spell resulted in a throbbing headache and exhaustion with each failure. At most, 3 failures would cause his brain to ache, his mental energy depleted, requiring rest and recovery before he could continue constructing spell models. This is the drawback of insufficient mental strength. If a first-ring mage were to construct a spell model for a zero-ring spell, not to mention being 10 times more efficient than Gauda, even if they failed, they could fail dozens of times a day without a problem. Constructing a spell model is indeed not simple. No wonder it took my predecessor more than a year to master the spells of repair and Mage's Hand, Gauda muttered to himself. Even mastering a zero-ring spell is so difficult, one can imagine how much effort is required to become a powerful mage. However, he did not complain. It is said that mages are masters. How can one become a master without first being a grandson? Failure is the mother of success. Gauda closed his eyes and reviewed the failed construction, quickly finding the problem. While focusing on controlling the movement of the third star, the position of the second star shifted slightly. One small change affects the whole thing. With a second star orbit connecting the second and third stars already extended, any slight shift in the position of the second star would naturally cause the entire spell model to collapse. This is another difficulty in constructing spell models. There can be no mistakes, otherwise everything has to start from scratch, instead of simply correcting where it went wrong. The margin for error is too low, Gauda muttered to himself, subconsciously thinking, could we optimize the spell model construction process? If other mages knew his thoughts at this moment, they would surely laugh at his ignorance. Not to mention that this method of constructing spell models, passed down for countless years, could possibly have room for optimization, and even if it did, how could a mage apprentice think of it? Gauda didn't have such trivial concerns. In the world of mathematics, if a method doesn't work or is difficult, changing the approach is very common. Could we first determine the positions of all the stars and then connect the star orbits? Such an idea suddenly popped into Gauda's mind. After this idea appeared, he felt enlightened, and the more he thought about it, the more feasible it seemed, even feeling that this was the correct way to construct spell models. This way, even if any star shifts from its original position during the spell model construction process, it won't cause the entire spell model to collapse. Everything can be started from scratch, only the position of that star needs to be adjusted in time. Compared to traditional spell model construction methods, the efficiency improvement is more than just a little bit. It's like the difference between an abacus and a computer. Gauda has always been very proactive. If they have an idea, they execute it. The first problem to solve was how to determine the position of each star. All spell recipes record the spell model construction process by connecting star orbits and determining the position of each star through relative displacement, without explaining how to determine the position of stars without connecting star orbits. But for Geode, this was no problem at all. The existing information was sufficient. It's just simple analytic geometry. Simply establish a Cartesian coordinate system, then decompose the vector coordinates of each star, and you can determine the position of each star. First, an origin is needed. The origin is the source of all vectors. Only by determining the origin can the length and distance be determined, and then the vector coordinates of each node can be determined. In the spellcasting universe, besides the stars and spell models, there are no other objects. However, the stars are constantly moving and obviously cannot be used as a fixed reference point. While the spell models don't move, they are composed of multiple stars, so how can they be used as a reference point? If one of the stars in the spell model is used as the origin, overlapping nodes or intersecting star orbits will occur. However, this is easily solved by considering the position of the first star as the origin. A classic ZIS coordinate system is established centered on the origin. An ordered ternary array is then used to determine the position of each node in the spell model. The ternary array consists of 3 numbers that guide how to move from the origin, the starting point of the vector, to its apex, the ending point of the vector. The first number represents how far to move along the x-axis, positive for right, negative for left. The second number represents how far to move along the y-axis after that. The third number represents how far to move along the z-axis. Similarly, the coordinates of each star can be deduced from the star movements recorded in the spell recipe. Gauda stood up, took a charcoal pencil from the shelf beside him, and began recording directly on the blank space of the spell recipe. The first star was the origin, with coordinates 0, 0, 0. Move forward 1, move right 1 and 1/3, move up 1/4, left and right are the x-axis, forward and backward are the y-axis, and up and down are the z-axis. The second star's coordinates were 4/3, 1, 1/4. Move forward 1/2, move right 2/3, move down 1/2. The third star moved from the second star, so it couldn't be directly compared to the origin, but that wasn't a big problem. It was just simple vector addition. Through calculation, the coordinates of the third star could be obtained as 2, 3/2, minus 1/4. He continued calculating in this manner. Soon, Gauda had broken down the acid splash spell model into ZIS coordinate axis and 9 vector coordinates, including the origin. Then, Gauda stared intently at the 9 ternary arrays on the paper and began trying to memorize them. Clearly, 9 ternary arrays were much simpler than the complex descriptions of spell recipes. Not to mention Gauda's innate and extremely high sensitivity to numbers. In just a few minutes, he had memorized the 9 coordinates. Let's give it a try. Now that the preliminary work was done, Gauda got right to work and immediately began to try it out. Chapter 17, Acid Splash. Gauda entered a meditative state once more, his mind immersed in the sea of magical stars. The first star was successfully fixed, serving as the origin. He captured the second star and began moving it, coordinates, 4/3, 1, 1/4. He captured the third star and began moving it, coordinates, 2, 3/2, minus 1/4. The second star shifted, its coordinates changing to 4/3, 9/8, 1/4, so he corrected its position. Correction complete. The fourth star, coordinates. The third star shifted, so he began correcting it. Correction complete. Oh no. He was so focused on the third star that he missed the first star shifting. The first star's position shifted. He tried to correct its position but gave up, failing. Somewhat discouraged, Gauda exited the meditative state, rubbing his temples to regain his composure and pondering. The construction of this magical model was progressing smoothly as Gauda had envisioned, but the shift of the first star forced him to halt the attempt. Because a problem he hadn't considered had arisen. The first star serves as the origin, and the coordinates of all other stars are established based on it. While the positions of other stars can be corrected by referring to the origin if they shift, what if the first star shifts? The first star itself has no reference point and cannot be corrected like the others, although it can deduce 0, 0, 0 from the coordinates of the other stars that haven't shifted. But then a new problem arises. Without an origin point, how can we ensure that the positions of the other stars haven't shifted? Doesn't that mean starting all over again? Gauda didn't give up on his idea. He addressed the problem as it arose. Regardless, his approach to spell model construction was more efficient than his previous one. At least only when the first star shifted did he need to start over. In other cases, he could continue building the spell model by promptly correcting the shifted star's position. But this exception was precisely what Gauda found most bothersome. If it were just a trick, it wouldn't be so bad, since the trick's spell model only has a maximum of 10 stars, so starting over wouldn't be a big deal. But when it comes to first-ring spells, or even second-ring spells, spell models composed of dozens or even hundreds of stars, having to start all over again after completing more than half because the first star has shifted can be incredibly frustrating. If only I could find a fixed point, Gauda muttered. But in the spell star sea, there was nothing but spell stars and spell models, and the spell stars were constantly moving randomly. Where could he find a fixed point? Fixed point, fixed point. Wait, in a flash, Gauda grasped a crucial point. There's nothing but stars and spell models in the spell star sea. That's someone else. There's something else in my spell star sea. His eyes suddenly brightened. Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Yes, it was Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Gauda didn't know the origin of Wind Spirit Moon Shadow, but it hovered quietly and steadily in the very center of his spell star sea, radiating a pure white light. Completely still. Isn't this a ready-made origin? Gauda picked up his charcoal pencil and reanalyzed the coordinates of the 9 nodes of the Acid Splash spell model. With Wind Spirit Moon Shadow as the new origin, the first star was no longer considered the origin, and its coordinates were naturally no longer 0, 0, 0. Gauda set it to 1, 1, 1, as the equidistant scale for the spell model. Then, based on this, he derived the coordinates of the second star as 7/3, 2, 5/4, and the coordinates of the third star as. Soon, the new 9 coordinates were listed on the spell formula by Gauda. He spent a few minutes memorizing these 9 ternary numbers again, enduring the slight throbbing in his head, and entered a meditative state for the third time to construct the Acid Splash spell model. He stared directly at the Wind Spirit Moon Shadow, which radiated a bright light, and captured the first wandering star around it. Using the Wind Spirit Moon Shadow as a reference point, the first star successfully moved to position 1, 1, 1. The second star moved to 7/3, 2, 5/4. The third star moved. The fourth star moved. The coordinates of the second star shifted, and correction began. After correction, the fifth star was captured. The fifth star successfully moved to its coordinates. The first star shifted, and correction began. Gauda was completely immersed in constructing the spell model, like solving an interesting math problem. For a moment, he entered a state of complete absorption, even unaware of the throbbing pain in his head caused by the depletion of mental energy. The sixth star moved. The seventh star moved. The eighth star moved. The sixth star, after correction of its shift, moved the ninth star to its coordinates. The 9 stars returned to their positions, and the connection began. Following the optimized steps, Gauda proceeded step by step in an orderly manner. Mental energy started from the first star and began to extend, connecting to the second star. Because the 9 stars were already in fixed positions and didn't need to be moved by these unruly things, the star trail connection was exceptionally fast. In the blink of an eye, Gauda's mental power connected the 9 stars together. In an instant, a stunning star trail appeared between the 9 magnificent stars. This star trail emitted a faint starlight, starting from the first star and trailing a long beam of starlight, traversing all 9 stars. The star trail was complete, and the spell model appeared. A brand new, constellation-like spell model appeared in Gauda's sea of spells. The moment the spell model was successfully constructed, Gauda sensed that he had mastered a magical power. Success? Just like that, even though he was confident that his optimized spell model construction method was superior to the traditional method, he hadn't expected it to be so smooth, succeeding on the second try. Normally, for a spell apprentice like him with relatively little training, mastering a spell would take at least 6 months and at most a year. Even a seasoned apprentice like Master Seda would need over a month to master a single spell. Yet now, he's only spent a single day. Such efficiency in learning magic is something only a fully fledged mage can achieve. And Gauda, according to the Mage ranking system, is currently still a first-class apprentice, the lowest tier among mage apprentices. The apprenticeship stage is divided into 3 levels: first class, second class, and third class. The apprenticeship ranking is much simpler than that of a fully fledged mage, determined solely by two indicators: magical power and mental strength. Take the apprentice meditation method as an example. A first-class apprentice can conjure one or more lotus petals through meditation and cast one spell. A second-class apprentice can conjure 8 or more lotus petals through meditation and have enough magical power to cast 5 spells in one go. A third-class apprentice can conjure 16 or more lotus petals through meditation and have enough magical power to cast 20 spells in one go. This clearly demonstrates that, although both are mage apprentices, the difference in strength between first-class and third-class apprentices is like heaven and earth. Let's test the effect. Having successfully constructed a spell model and mastered extraordinary power for the first time, Gauda couldn't wait to try out the new spell. Acid Splash, he silently chanted. At that moment, his magical power flowed, rising instantly from his lower abdomen, flowing into his magical sea, and using the newly constructed Acid Splash spell model as its trajectory, transforming into new power before surging out of his body. Guided by Gauda's will, it concentrated in his right hand. A bowl-sized sphere of acid appeared, now held loosely in Gauda's right palm. Then, with a flick of his right hand, Gauda launched it towards a corner of a wall not far away. Sizzle. Sizzle, the sphere hit the corner, like a water-filled balloon being punctured, immediately scattering in all directions. Anything the acid touched was instantly corroded, emitting wisps of smoke. This scene lasted for about 3 seconds before the acid evaporated as if it had never existed. However, the burn marks on the corner of the wall and the slight corrosion on the walls demonstrated the destructive power of the splashed acid. If even wooden walls and stone floors couldn't completely withstand the acid, how could the human body possibly resist it? This is so interesting, Gauda exclaimed, filled with boundless pleasure and wonder. Constructing a spell model is like solving a difficult math problem. Although the process is difficult and arduous, the pleasure of finding the answer is addictive. And the positive feedback from successfully constructing a spell model is 10 or even 100 times greater than solving a math problem. Each spell model represents a new kind of extraordinary power. Let's conquer the next spell. Gauda was full of fighting spirit, preparing to continue constructing a new spell model, but at that moment, everything suddenly went black before his eyes. His body swayed involuntarily, almost falling, followed by a hollow, dizzy, and throbbing sensation in his head. He belatedly realized that his mental energy had been overdrawn. Constructing spell models 3 times that night had already exhausted Gauda's mental energy. This kind of overdraft could not be recovered through meditation. He needed rest. Although he was eager to master the other 2 spells, Gauda knew the principle of moderation. He carefully put away 3 spell recipes and obediently went back to his room to rest. Chapter 18 Amy's Intelligence. In the quiet workshop, the candlelight flickered. Gauda remained motionless for a while, then suddenly raised his right hand, extending his index finger and pointing diagonally forward. This gesture seemed somewhat inexplicable, even mystical. However, after Gauda made this gesture, a strange energy fluctuation emanated from his fingertip, shooting out a beam of blue-white light. The beam itself wasn't thick, but it carried an inexplicable chill. The next instant, the icy beam shot out from Gauda's fingertip like a flying knife, striking directly at the small gray mouse corpse he had placed before him. The moment the beam touched the mouse, a faint cracking sound could be heard in the air. A thin layer of ice instantly condensed on the mouse's fur. The ice remained for about 20 seconds before dissipating. It lasts 20 seconds on a dead mouse. If the target is a mage like Seda, 3 seconds would be considered good, Gauda calculated silently. Then, he let out a long breath. 6 days, 3 spells mastered. After thoroughly perfecting his new method for constructing spell models, he successfully constructed the Acid Splash spell model in one go. Although the main reason was that his construction method was far more efficient than traditional methods, there was also an element of luck involved. Perhaps there are so-called beginner benefits in learning spells. In any case, the construction of the Increase Resistance and Freezing Ray spell models did not continue the good luck of the first day. Both spells failed to be completed after excessive mental energy depletion, requiring a second and even third attempt after mental energy recovered the next day. 6 days had passed since he purchased the 3 spell recipes from Yom. Just now, Gauda finally successfully constructed the Freezing Ray spell model as well. This signified that he has mastered all 3 new spells. First class apprentice, 6 days, mastering 3 spells. No one would believe it if you told them. This is the advantage of Gaod's current method of constructing spell models. However, Gaod did not consider himself a genius. He clearly understood that the reason he was able to achieve this incredible transformation was simply because he stood on the shoulders of giants. Ultimately, it was nothing more than picking up scraps from the work of his predecessors. For the people of this world, first, they needed to change their ingrained concepts, transforming the traditional method of determining star positions by connecting star orbits to a new method of determining star positions first and then connecting star orbits. Then, they needed to use analytical geometry to establish a coordinate system to disassemble the spell model and determine star positions. This required both the courage to question authority and the knowledge to solve the problems inherent in the new method. More importantly, they needed a wind spirit moon shadow. The traditional method of constructing spell models had been passed down for countless years. The more powerful the mage, the more deeply ingrained their practice of the traditional method, and the less likely they were to question or change it due to their inertia. Weaker mages, on the other hand, would never have such delusional thoughts. For example, the heliocentric theory, which seems obvious now, was once a sacred and inviolable truth, absolutely unquestionable. But for the otherworldly visitor, Gauda, he didn't have any of those outdated notions of truth or falsehood. He was still a complete novice mage apprentice, his mindset regarding magic not yet fixed. Moreover, for an excellent math student, daring to question and change is a fundamental quality. If the teacher's method is wrong or ineffective, then using one's own method to solve the problem is perfectly normal. As for analytic geometry and the Cartesian coordinate system, for the people of this world, it was a completely new field of knowledge, a pioneering new concept. But for Gauda, it was simply retrieving a practical method from his own knowledge base. In Gauda's previous life, analytic geometry and the Cartesian coordinate system weren't considered particularly profound knowledge. Any ordinary middle school student could easily make connections in such situations. But for the people of this world, thinking about coordinate systems was incredibly difficult. Some things, even if you figure them out, are actually quite simple in principle, but getting to that point can be a stumbling block for countless people. If you can't think of it, you simply can't. Apples have fallen countless times, but only Newton conceived of universal gravitation. Even the seemingly simple Cartesian coordinate system was born in the 17th century. Before that, no one had conceived of it. Having mastered 5 spells, my current mana is just enough to support me casting 5 tricks, Gauda muttered to himself, rubbing his slightly throbbing temples. There are shortcuts to building spell models, but the growth of mental strength and mana requires a steady, step-by-step approach. He had already tested it. After casting 5 level 0 spells, his mana would be completely depleted. Casting the 5 tricks he had mastered in turn would leave him with no mana. This awkward situation, to put it simply, was like a mage with god tier gears useless without mana. Gauda was helpless against it. Mana growth couldn't be achieved overnight. This awkward situation would likely persist for some time. Money, and essence, since short-term mana growth was unrealistic, he needed to find a way to do more with his limited mana, such as enhancing the effectiveness of spells. This was unrealistic for others, but for Gauda, there was a way. Because he had Wind Spirit Moon Shadow, which could add points. However, adding points required consuming essence. Thinking of this, Gauda felt a pang of regret. The Grey-Eyed Rat's meager essence shouldn't be so easily used on the repair spell. Although the repair spell plus is good in every way, it's ultimately unusable in actual combat. The spell problem is temporarily solved. The next focus is on obtaining a new essence. I'll go to the commercial district again tomorrow and see if there are any connections, Gauda pondered. He'd been in this world for 11 days, and with each passing day, his anxiety grew. But even if there were connections, money was required, and after purchasing those 3 spell formulas, his savings had shrunk to 30 silver and 8 copper. Thinking of this, Gauda couldn't help but sigh again. Indeed, in any place, even in any world, you can't do without money. When Gauda left the workshop and returned to his small bedroom, his roommate Amy was already in bed. These past few days, he'd been focused on building spell models and had been coming home very late. Gauda quietly took off his outer clothes, lay down, and prepared to rest. Gauda. You're back, Amy's voice came from the darkness. Gauda paused, then gave a soft hum, apologizing. I've been cultivating for longer these past few days, so I came back late. Did I disturb you? No, I came back late today too. I just lay down and haven't fallen asleep yet. Amy's voice was soft, hesitant about something. After some internal struggle, she finally cautiously asked, Gauda, are you planning to deal with Mage Seda? In the darkness, Gauda's expression changed, his heart skipped a beat, and he even subconsciously wondered if he had revealed something these past few days. I know. You told me a long time ago that if we don't do something, we'll all die. Amy took a deep breath, as if making a decision. The mage is too powerful. I've always felt that no matter what we do, we can't change anything. Mage Seda is indeed very powerful, Gauda replied ambiguously. You asked me that day. Amy mimicked Gauda's tone, repeating his exact words. What would you do if someone tried to kill you? I couldn't answer then, but I've been thinking about it these past few days. He nodded forcefully in the darkness. At least I can't do nothing, right? I can't just sit and wait to die, God stated. The Mage Seda specializes in necromancy, and there's a spell, I don't know the name, that renders its target powerless upon contact. God remained silent, offering no response. Amy continued, I've heard Elon say that one of the 3 great principles of mages is never let anyone know your spells. Although I don't know the specifics, I think this might be of some help to you. Chapter 19 The Power of Spells. The 3 Laws of Mages. Upon hearing this unfamiliar term, Gauda's heart skipped a beat, and he secretly memorized the law. It was Elon who said it. He said that the Mage Seda told him, Amy explained, but he only mentioned this one, he didn't mention the other 2. Why would Elon tell you this? Besides, since never let others know your spells is one of the 3 laws of mages, how could the Mage Seda let you know his spells? Gauda frowned slightly, asking subtly. Hearing God's question, Amy understood his meaning and quickly explained, Elon mentioned it to us in the restaurant before, to show off his status as a true apprentice of Master Seda. You weren't in the restaurant then, so you didn't hear it. That's true. Master Seda never mentioned any of the 3 principles of mages to us. If Elon hadn't said it, how would we have known about it? As for Master Seda's magic, do you remember? Half a year ago, when Master Seda asked Neo to test a medicine, Neo was scared and tried to run away. He ran to the backyard, and I happened to be there. I saw Master Seda simply reach out and touch Neo, and Neo collapsed to the ground. If that spell could work without physical contact, why would Master Seda have gone to all that trouble? Amy nodded, quite certain. I see. God seemed thoughtful. What Amy said made sense, and he believed her. He also thought back to his own first day in this world, when he had also experienced Master Seda's magic. The hand that had inflicted such immense pain still haunted Gauda to this day. It seems that at least 2 of the Mage Seda's spells require physical contact to take effect. So, if it really comes to the final stage, and I have to confront him, the first thing I must do is avoid physical contact as much as possible. Gauda pondered silently, his thoughts wandering. Besides avoiding it, is it possible to exploit this? I understand. Go to sleep early, we have work to do tomorrow, Gauda said softly, lost in thought. Amy didn't get the response she expected from Gauda. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but didn't know what to say, and ultimately remained silent. A short while later, the room was filled with the steady breathing of Gauda as he slept. The next day, in the afternoon, after finishing the preparation of the basic spider venom potion early, Gauda left the workshop and went to the commercial district of Hogan City for the 3rd time. He didn't notice that in the shadows of the bushes directly opposite the entrance to the herb garden, 3 pairs of eyes lit up simultaneously. The owners of those eyes were 3 lean yet muscular men. None of them were unkempt, their messy beards were stained with wine, their hair was greasy and tangled, and their clothes were covered in indelible oil stains, the physical characteristics of people from the lower classes. The 3 men all had cunning and belligerent eyes, clearly not good people. After watching Gauda walk away, the 3 began to whisper among themselves. Boss, is that him? The darkest-skinned man asked. That's him. I've inquired. That old mage at the Seda herb garden rarely leaves his house. Whether it's selling potions or buying raw materials, he has his apprentices do it all. It's just that previously, an older apprentice was in charge, but recently this kid took over. The man called Boss spoke, his voice somewhat shrill, inconsistent with the fierce aura in his eyes. Sounding more like a rooster. Good thing, this kid doesn't look very old, he'll be easier to deal with, but he's a mage apprentice, he knows spells. The shortest of the 3 hesitated. Are we really going to make a move? If it were an old mage, we would indeed be wary, but what's there to worry about with such a little kid? A mage apprentice this age doesn't have much combat power, at most he'll know 1 or 2 tricks, and most likely it's a non-lethal trick like Hand of the Mage. The three of us have worked in the mines for so many years, we're all strong, we can't take down such a little brat. Among zero-ring spells, Hand of the Mage is arguably the most well-known and representative trick, and it's basically the first spell that every mage apprentice must learn and master. So even many people who aren't mages know this spell. Third brother, you're still too timid, the second brother echoed the eldest brother. This kid didn't bring any packages this time, so he's not going to sell potions, but to buy raw materials for that old mage. The eldest brother spoke up again. I asked him too. It seems that the old mage has been researching a high-level potion these past few years. The raw materials required are extremely precious and expensive, so this kid must be carrying a lot of money. We were already planning to leave Hogan City for Bremen City to make a living elsewhere. After this heist, we can leave immediately. Even if that old mage is powerful, he definitely won't be able to find us to settle accounts. The other two couldn't help but nod in agreement, thinking it made sense. When do we make our move? The third brother asked again. We'll make our move when we get to the slums. It's chaotic there, and it'll be troublesome to track us down. This way, we can buy ourselves more time to leave Hogan City and ensure that nothing goes wrong. Okay, the dark and dirty section of the slums was still the only way to get to Hogan City's commercial district. However, compared to the last two times, Gouda, who had recently mastered 3 zero-ring spells, was undoubtedly more confident this time and no longer needed to be cautious and timid. Besides, even if the slums were a mixed bag, teeming with thieves and scoundrels, under normal circumstances, a plainly dressed commoner like him, in broad daylight, wouldn't encounter so many unexpected incidents. But Gouda forgot one thing: an accident is called an accident precisely because it's unexpected. Just like now, he had just reached the corner of an alley leading to the street. Because it was an alley, visibility was poor, and he couldn't see any shadows. It was under these circumstances that he felt a slight chill on the back of his head and heard a sharp whooshing sound in his ear. A sneak attack. And it was aimed at his head. Gouda reacted immediately, but it was too late. In his haste, he instinctively bent his body to lower the point of impact, avoiding his head, a vital area. Gouda's instinctive reaction prevented his head from being blown apart, but he was struck in the back. The powerful force made Gouda groan and stagger. Feeling the burning pain in his back, Gouda made the most correct response at that moment, using the force to roll over and successfully avoid the second attack that followed. He quickly stood up and saw the attackers. 3 burly men, each holding a wooden stick, were glaring at him menacingly. They were just looking to rob him. But they had no intention of killing him. Though ruthless, they weren't vicious criminals. Besides, they only intended to steal his money. They didn't have any deep-seated hatred for Gouda. Under normal circumstances, why would they have the intention to kill him? They planned to knock him unconscious with a blow, take all his money, and then run away. Luckily, it was just wooden sticks, Gouda thought to himself, relieved. If the attackers had been holding weapons, he would likely be dead by now. Who are you? Why are you attacking me? Gouda demanded sharply. Kid, you reacted quickly. Hand over your money, and we'll let you go, the leader threatened, staring at Gouda. So it's robbery, Gouda realized. He thought to himself that since arriving in this world, he had hardly had any contact with the outside world. How could he have offended anyone? However, Gouda wasn't prepared to pay to avoid trouble. Moreover, he only had a few dozen silver coins on him, which certainly wouldn't satisfy the 3 thugs before him. Thinking this, Gouda raised his hand. A ray flashing with a cold blue light burst forth from his fingertips. This ray was as fast as lightning, flying straight towards the leader, leaving a crystalline trail. The ray appeared suddenly and moved incredibly fast. Coupled with the fact that Gouda's roll hadn't created much distance between him and the 3, the attack was impossible to react to. Gouda hadn't expected them to answer his question when he asked about their identities. He had only spoken to slightly distract them, buying himself time to cast his spell. The ray struck the leader directly, and with a soft cracking sound, a thin layer of ice instantly formed on the leader's skin. He felt a bone-chilling cold and intense pain, his expression contorted in agony. Freezing ray. Chapter 20 Unexpected News. While the 3 were stunned by the freezing ray, Gouda once again activated the spell model to cast a spell. The next moment, his left hand flung out a small, emerald green liquid ball, like a malicious comet streaking through the air, heading straight for the leader, whose movements were slowed by the freezing ray. After spinning briefly in the air, The ball formed a large cloud of mist-like spray, then landed accurately on the leader. The moment the acid touched the man, his clothes and skin hissed and corroded, emitting thick smoke and a pungent sulfurous odor. The fabric of his clothes began to melt, and his skin followed suit, leaving behind a greenish, corrosive stain. The acid only lasted for about 3 seconds before disappearing, but even those 3 seconds were enough to cause the man excruciating pain. He collapsed to the ground, writhing and struggling, emitting agonizing screams. In the dark alley, the acid quickly vanished, leaving only corrosive blue smoke lingering in the air. The man lay on the ground, still convulsing violently, his body a gruesome sight, covered in burn marks, bearing no resemblance to his earlier ferocity. The other two were terrified out of their minds. They had some understanding of mages, but not a deep one. After all, they were just small-time thugs with a few connections. Therefore, they didn't realize that a mage apprentice like Gouda, without any background, at this age, was likely only a first-class apprentice, with limited magical power, able to cast no more than 5 spells at most. Master Mage, spare us, spare us. We didn't know you were a mage, we offended you, we'll never dare to do it again, the second of the 3 pleaded incessantly. In his eyes, this boy with a still childish face was even more terrifying than the city's top gangster. You are a venerable mage, please don't stoop to our level, don't attack us again, he said, his voice trembling as he watched the magical light reappear at Gouda's fingertips. The sight of his leader's miserable state left him utterly devoid of the courage to resist. He feared he would suffer the same fate. Gouda silently lowered his right hand, suppressing his anger, and coldly asked, "Who are you? Why did you attack me?" The same question as before, but this time they answered honestly. "We are miners from the Nottingham coal mine." Seeing that Gouda's anger seemed to have subsided somewhat, he was like a drowning man breathing oxygen, hastily pouring out everything. "Since the Nottingham mine dried up, the 3 of us have lost our jobs and can only do odd jobs in the city, working sporadically. We knew this couldn't go on. A few days ago, while drinking, we heard some news that a new mine was opening in Bremen and urgently needed miners, so we planned to go there and continue our old trade, but you usually spend all your money in taverns, so now when you need money, you can't even afford the travel expenses, right?" Gouda said knowingly, coldly. Miners in this era typically lacked any sense of saving. They were all living paycheck to paycheck. As soon as they received their wages, they'd indulge themselves first, spending the money on drinking and pleasure. Therefore, the beginning of each month, when wages were settled, was the busiest and most profitable time for the city's taverns. The second brother, somewhat embarrassed, still pleaded, "We were lazy, we had wicked thoughts. Please don't hold it against us, scum. Master, why did you choose me as your target? Do I look like a rich person?" Gouda wasn't about to let the 3 off the hook, pressing for details. The second brother, nervous, glanced cautiously at Gouda and explained, "It was the eldest brother. A while ago, Phil's potion shop was hiring temporary herb gatherers, and the 3 of us went. We went up the mountain with the shop assistants to gather thorns, working as herb gatherers for a few days." Gouda surprisingly remembered what this man said. When he and Amy first went to Phil's potion shop, they had indeed seen a sign outside advertising temporary herb gatherers, which matched perfectly. During a break from gathering herbs, the boss was chatting with the shop assistants when one of them shared an amusing anecdote. Of the 4 herb gardens their pharmacy partners with, your garden's potion master is the most restless. He supplies them with low-level potions while simultaneously purchasing high-level herbs from them, giving back most of his profits to them. Then the head potion master reprimanded him for disrespecting the potion master, Seda. He added that Seda was in seclusion researching high-level potions, never leaving his garden, and even the distribution and purchasing were handled by his apprentices, demonstrating his dedication. Once he successfully concocted a high-level potion, it would be extraordinary. It was upon hearing this that the boss got the wicked idea. Later, the boss found out that the apprentice in charge of purchasing and distributing herbs at your garden had recently been replaced by someone much younger than you. We figured the younger one, the easier it would be to take action. After hearing the whole story, Gouda remained silent for a moment, then suddenly asked, "Have you found out when our herb garden will next purchase medicinal herbs? If you can answer that, I'll let you off this time," he added. I know. The third brother, who had been trembling, quickly spoke up. "The shop assistant said your herb garden just placed an order last month, and this month they urgently placed another order for the same herbs. They have stock of all the other herbs, but the ones you bought are rare and will have to wait for the next restock. He even boasted that your herb garden's pharmacist is in a hurry, but there's nothing he can do because the herbs he needs are only available through Phil Pharmacy in the entire city of Hogan. The three of us have been staking out outside the herb garden for days. Today we saw you leave and enter the city empty-handed, so we figured the pharmacy must have restocked, and you went to get the medicine with money. So, having obtained some crucial information, Gada's attention shifted, and his anger gradually subsided. He waved his hand impatiently and said, "Get lost." The other party was only after money, not murder, and had already received sufficient punishment. Under these circumstances, he couldn't bring himself to kill these three. Although Gada dared to draw his sword and splatter blood when faced with a Yilan's threat, he was ultimately not a violent and bloodthirsty person. "Thank you, Master Mage." "Thank you, Master Mage. We'll be going now." Seeing Gada relent, the two nodded vigorously, not daring to think or linger any longer. They hurriedly helped their leader, who was still lying on the ground in pain, and ran away. Watching the three leave, Gada could still feel a burning pain in his back. That blow was powerful. Even if it was just a blunt weapon like a wooden stick, being hit like that was indeed unpleasant. But the anxiety and fervor in his heart made him temporarily ignore the pain. The anxiety came from learning from the three that his time was really running out. The fervor came from the fact that this was the first time Gada had fully unleashed a spell. Even though he had cast spells and experienced them after successfully constructing the spell model, he still hadn't expected the power of a spell to be so great in actual combat. And this was just a trick. What if it were a first-level spell? I'm afraid one spell could send all three of them to meet their great-grandmother, right, Horn City, Commercial District. Phil's potion shop. Gada glanced around at the entrance, then casually stepped inside. "What do you need?" the shop assistant greeted him, quickly recognizing him. "The interval between your two deliveries this time is shorter than before. I'm not here to pick up any goods today," Gada said, browsing the magical potions on the counter. They were numerous, but most were ordinary, low-level auxiliary potions. "Our mage specifically asked me to inquire whether the herbs he requested have arrived. As you know, our delivery time is fixed to the last day of each month. We know Mage Seda is very anxious, but the goods will indeed arrive at the end of the month. Please tell Mage Seda to be patient." The shop assistant smiled, showing no impatience whatsoever. "I understand. I will pass on the message to the mage." Gada nodded calmly and turned to leave the shop. Chapter 21, Creeping in the Dark Swamp. As soon as he left the pharmacy, a worried look appeared on Gada's face. He knew his time was running out, but he hadn't expected it to be this tight. It was the last day of the month. It was the 13th day of the awakening month. Gada silently calculated his remaining time. In this world, a year also had 12 months, called Frost Month, Awakening Month, Spring Sprout Month, Green Leaf Month, Flower Flame Month, Sunlit Month, Harvest Month, Dark Night Month, Frost Gold Month, Mist Frost Month, Frozen Month, and Winter Solstice Month. However, each month didn't have odd or even days, all had 30 days. He had woken up on the second day of the awakening month. Today was the 13th day. Only 17 days remained until the end of the month. After getting accurate information from Phil's potion shop and calculating how much time he had left, Gada arrived at Pierre's general store with a heavy heart. This trip wasn't for shopping. In fact, since buying the spell recipe last time, his savings were already stretched thin, making any purchases impossible. "You mean you can repair damaged magical items?" In the general store, Pierre stared at Gada in surprise, seemingly incredulous, wondering if he had misheard. Gada nodded firmly. "Repairing some lower-level magical items shouldn't be a problem. Aren't you a potion master?" Pierre asked suspiciously. "Or perhaps you're an alchemist, potion master, alchemist, and rune master, the three main secondary professions in the mage world." Gada shook his head. "Not exactly an alchemist, more like an enchanter repairman. Alchemists can create all sorts of magical items, including repairing them. Enchanter repairmen, on the other hand, specialize in repairing damaged magical equipment or tools. Their profession is more like a craftsman's, and their skill level is far lower than that of an alchemist." That being said, Pierre still showed a respectful expression upon hearing this, whether genuinely or just for God's sake was unknown. In a place like ours, to see a mage apprentice who studies both potion making and enchanting, and so young at that, is truly remarkable. "I've only scratched the surface. I don't deserve such praise, sir," Gada replied modestly. Very well, I happen to have a damaged divine ring on hand, damaged for several years now. I haven't been able to find anyone in this small town capable of repairing it, and it's only a level 0 magical item. It's not worth making a special trip to Bremen just to repair it, so I'll give it to you to try. Pierre fumbled under the counter for a moment, then pulled out a dark gray iron ring. In a small city like Hogan, you can still find quite a few mages studying potion making. Because no matter where you are, the market for potions is vast. Where there's demand, there's a market. But mages studying enchanting are practically non-existent. You can barely find any magical items in a small town, let alone damaged ones. Those with a skill either starve to death or have moved to the big cities. Just as a doctor in a rural area can at least make a living, a car mechanic in the countryside will almost certainly starve. If you can repair this ring, I can give you 30 silver coins for the repair fee, Pierre said, making an OK sign to indicate the 30 silver coin labor fee. 1 gold coin equals 20 silver coins, so 30 silver coins equals 1.5 gold coins. A level 0 magical item generally costs between 12 and 15 gold coins. So 1.5 gold coins for repair is equivalent to 10% of the item's value, which is a very reasonable price. From the first time he bought a basic spider venom potion from Pierre, Gata already knew this shopkeeper was reliable. And indeed, Pierre was quite honest. Deal, I'll repair it and bring it to you tomorrow, Gata said, taking the ring from Pierre. The iron ring was of moderate width, its surface polished smooth as silk to ensure the wearer's comfort. Mysterious runes were engraved on the outside of the ring. These runes were the source of the ring's magical power. However, a crack remained on the ring, damaging it and piercing through the runes, rendering the ring's magic ineffective. Pierre nodded, quite reassured, and waved his hand, saying, "No rush, bring it over whenever you're ready." It wasn't that he had instantly become close friends with God after only a few encounters and trusted him completely. It was mainly because a damaged level 0 magical item wasn't particularly valuable. Unlike high-level magical items, which use precious materials to support high-level spells, level 0 magical items only require ordinary refined iron. Therefore, without the added value of magic, this divine guide ring was essentially just an iron ring. After putting away the ring, Gwent thought for a moment and then asked, "Where in the city can I buy live ley line creatures?" Live ley line creatures? Pierre frowned upon hearing this, not questioning God's intentions, but pondering for a while before replying, "You can find some in big cities like Bremen, but it's difficult in Hogan. Capturing ley line creatures alive requires far more manpower and resources than hunting them, and there's no market for it in a place like Hogan, so you understand." God nodded silently in understanding. Just like in his previous life, only big cities had pet shops and zoos. Suddenly, a series of neat and powerful footsteps came from the street outside the alley, growing louder as they approached, interrupting their conversation. Gwent and Pierre looked up. They saw a group of uniformed city guards walking along the main road. Two of the guards broke away from the group as they passed the alleyway where Pierre's general store was located, entering the alley and heading towards the two of them. Two city guards, dressed in dark blue long-sleeved, belted tunics with epaulets indicating their rank, approached. The city emblem of Hogan was sewn onto their uniforms, giving them an exceptionally imposing appearance. They stopped outside the shop, and upon noticing Pierre's attention, bowed slightly. One of them stepped forward and announced in a serious yet polite tone, "Mr. Pierre, I have come on behalf of the city sheriff to deliver an urgent notice." His voice was not loud, even somewhat deep, but it was crystal clear, conveying an undeniable sense of urgency. A flicker of surprise crossed Pierre's eyes, but he quickly adjusted his expression to show respect for the city guards. God also kept his gaze fixed on the city guards, awaiting the information to be revealed. The number of swamp worms in the city's sewers has recently surged, and they are unusually active. The city's annual trading day is in a few days. To ensure the smooth running of the trading day, the sheriff has ordered all merchants on the streets to clean the sewers, specifically the sections of sewers within their premises. The city guard's words were concise and forceful. Pierre's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, revealing that the news had indeed caused him some trouble. However, he quickly composed himself, nodded slightly to the city guard, and expressed his gratitude. "Yes, I will complete the sewer cleaning before the trading day." After issuing the order, the two city guards turned and left, returning to their ranks. What is the trading day? And what are swamp worms? Compared to Pierre's confusion, God was more curious. "You, as a resident of Hogan City, don't know about the trading day?" Pierre looked surprised upon hearing God's question. I rarely go out, so I've never attended a trading day. God's expression remained unchanged, understanding that this was another problem caused by incomplete memory inheritance, and he casually made up an excuse. Pierre, though surprised, didn't think much of it and simply explained the trading day to Gouda. Mid-awakening time each year is the busiest trading day in Hogan City. At that time, the Hogan City Council opens the town square to everyone, holding a trading market where citizens can buy and sell all kinds of goods, including second-hand and old items. And those selling goods on the trading day are not just merchants, but also all sorts of ordinary people. The goods traded are incredibly diverse, ranging from handmade crafts to old clothes, furniture, and other unwanted personal items, even treasures of unknown origin and purpose. With enough luck and a keen eye, one might even find some good things at extremely low prices. In Gouda's understanding, it's like a flea market. Only, in this world, the concept of a flea market doesn't exist yet. As for the dark swamp worm, mentioning this, Pierre looked gloomy. It's the type of worm, generally living in dark, damp swampy environments, including city sewers. These worms themselves aren't dangerous, but they constantly secrete extremely viscous mucus. If left unchecked, the mucus they secrete will eventually clog the sewers, affecting sewage discharge and causing the city to stink. So, every so often, the city council organizes a cleanup of the swamp worms in the sewers. Occasionally, when the swamp worms proliferate, the city council is short-handed and requires each business to be responsible for the section of sewer that their shop faces. Is this job difficult? Gouda asked. These worms aren't dangerous, but as lealine creatures, they have a certain ability to camouflage themselves, are good at hiding, and live in the sewers, making them difficult to find and remove. Wait, Gouda's eyes gradually brightened. Boss, you mean these worms are lealine creatures? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22: The Second Origin. Pierre nodded. Boss, didn't you just say you couldn't find any live ley-line creatures in Hogan City? This is it. Gouda was delighted to receive confirmation. This counts. Pierre couldn't understand. In his mind, the ley-line creatures Gouda wanted to buy were either food or pets. How could these worms living in the sewers count? Ley-line creatures were extremely dangerous, but they were kept outside cities, and mages regularly patrolled and cleared the area around cities to ensure they wouldn't easily approach human settlements. Therefore, ley-line creatures generally didn't appear in cities, and if they did, they were usually controlled. Only the gray-eyed rat, which posed no threat to humans, was an exception. Although they possessed ley-line creature blood, because they posed no threat, they were no different from ordinary animals in the eyes of humans. The dark swamp worm was also this type of ley-line creature. Of course, this type of ley-line creature was extremely rare. Most ley-line creatures were extremely dangerous. How can this not count? Gouda thought to himself, though he certainly wouldn't say it aloud. Since these worms are good at hiding, how do you usually get rid of them? Either we use plenty of boiling water to flush the sewers, driving away and eliminating some of the worms, or we use insecticide, diluted and injected into the sewers to kill these swamp worms, Pierre said, shrugging. But these swamp worms, being ley-line creatures, are extremely resilient. Using hot water to flush them away often takes a lot of time, so we usually use insecticide. Insecticide is expensive. Gouda seized on the key point. Not really, Pierre shook his head. It's just insecticide for getting rid of worms. How expensive could it be? If the price were too high, no one would buy it. It just takes a little more time. Then what is it? Gouda could see Pierre was troubled by this task. Mainly because the sewers are smelly and damp. Who wants to go there? Pierre said helplessly. Gouda suddenly understood. Those who can afford a shop in the commercial district are generally quite wealthy and live a relatively comfortable life. Suddenly asking someone like that to clean worms from the filthy sewers would definitely be unsettling. Larger shops could delegate this work to their employees. Pierre, however, was in a difficult situation. His general store had no staff other than himself. Moreover, the city guards had given him a last-minute notice. The trading day was in 2 days, and with such a rush, he didn't have time to hire a temporary worker and had to do it himself. 2 clover silver coins, you pay for the insecticide, and I'll clean out the swamp worms for you, Gouda said, catching Pierre off guard. "You're interested in earning this kind of money?" he couldn't help but ask in surprise. "Why not?" Goddess spread his hands and asked. "Don't you want to pay for it? 2 clover silver coins for cleaning swamp worms." Frankly, that price was a bit high. In normal times, a silver coin plus a few copper coins would suffice to hire someone, but time was of the essence, and Pierre naturally wouldn't haggle over the price difference. "You don't mind the sewer environment and are willing to take this kind of work. I'm naturally delighted," Pierre said readily. "Then let's do it today. I'll clean out the swamp worms for you before I leave," Goddess said calmly, though inwardly he was impatient. "Good. There are a few bottles of insecticide left in the shop. You can take them and use them." Seeing Goddess' enthusiasm, Pierre had no reason to object. With the insecticide in hand, Pierre led Gouda to the nearest entrance to the Hogan City sewers to the general store. Compared to his previous life, the sewer system in this world was very rudimentary and lacked a systematic approach, far removed from modern sewer facilities. The entrances were even more haphazard, sewage outlets set up at the base of buildings or street corners. These were called sewage outlets, but in reality, they were just simple holes directly connected to shallow underground stone pipes, without any manhole covers, grates, or other protective measures. The entrance to the cave wasn't large, barely enough for one person to pass through. A stench wafted from the opening with the wind, causing Pierre to instinctively take 2 steps back and cover his nose and mouth with his right hand. The smell was naturally unpleasant for God as well. But having been paid to do the job, he took a deep breath and squeezed into the opening. Upon entering the sewers, a stench of countless odors assaulted his senses. Even though God was mentally prepared, he couldn't help but gag twice. Money is hard to earn, and excrement is hard to swallow, the old saying was true. Fortunately, God's main purpose wasn't to earn those 2 silver coins, but to reach the dark swamp creepers. He had asked for money to justify his actions, and also because money was money to be made. The sewers of Hogan City were interconnected, and the damp ground was slippery and nauseating. Not only was it narrow, but there was almost no light, making it difficult to find one's way. Besides insecticide, Pierre also provided God with a portable oil lamp for illumination. Using the light at the entrance as a reference, God quickly determined his direction. Following Pierre's instructions, he carefully traversed the narrow, slippery moss-covered pipe passageway. After 2 forks in the road, he arrived at a sewer bend. Above him lay the location of Pierre's general store, and this section of sewer was the one Pierre needed to clean. Confirming his location, God quickly retrieved the insecticide Pierre had given him. Insecticides weren't as precious as magic potions, and because their primary function was to kill insects in the sewage, they came in large bottles. This particular bottle, for example, held a full pint, 20 ounces, nearly 600 milliliters. God unscrewed the cap and attached the matching nozzle, designed for precise application. However, his first target wasn't the swamp worms that might lurk in the pipe walls, but rather the worms that might be lurking in the sewage at the bottom of the pipe. Perfect for conducting an experiment he'd long wanted to do, does obtaining this source necessarily require him to kill it with his own hands, or would it be acceptable for it to die at the hands of the tools he uses? Goddess sprayed the potion into the murky water, creating ripples. The effect spread rapidly through the water. After spraying about 10 ounces of insecticide, Goddess lit an oil lamp to illuminate the surface of the water, staring intently at the flowing sewage, quietly waiting for something. A few minutes later, a section of worm's corpse emerged from the water with a gurgling sound, carried by the sewage towards the drainage outlet outside the city. Gouda knew that the insecticide had taken effect. He focused his mind, immediately directing his attention to his thoughts. Origin. 0 rings, human, 1/7, gray-eyed rat, used, dark swamp worm, 2/7, spells. 0 rings, hand of the mage, repair plus, acid splash, freezing ray, increase resistance. Sure enough, it's not necessary to kill them personally to obtain the origin. This is fantastic news for Gouda. Because if you have to kill them personally to obtain the origin, then using magic potions or other magical items to kill them will not yield the origin. This is a huge limitation for mages. Good news makes one feel refreshed. Gouda instantly became energetic. With a thought, the insecticide in his hand floated into the air. Hand of the Mage. Casting Hand of the Mage, he controlled the nozzle of the insecticide to approach the crack in the sewer pipe wall, then turned the nozzle, and the insecticide instantly transformed into a fine mist, spraying into the crack. The lurking swamp worms and some ordinary worms, hiding in the crevices, began to react abnormally the moment they came into contact with the medicine. They struggled and convulsed, trying to escape the sudden and deadly attack. However, the medicine was powerful, quickly penetrating their skin and reaching their nervous system, causing the worms to lose vitality in a short time, gradually becoming limp and lifeless. However, most of them were ordinary worms. The number of swamp worms was still relatively small. Gata advanced step by step along the pipe, meticulously spraying every crevice and injecting the medicine into the sewage. With the help of the mage, Gata's work efficiency was extremely high, and the cleaning of this section of the sewer was completed in a few minutes. A faint chemical smell permeated the air. The effective ingredients of the insecticide would continue to work for a while. Although it couldn't be a permanent cure, it at least prevented the worms from making a comeback in the short term. And the second source had already been gathered. Origin: 0 rings, human, 1/7, gray-eyed rat, used, dark swamp worm, July 7th. Chapter 23, Acid Splash. Drip, drip, Gord, carrying an oil lamp, walked through the sewer pipes. An unknown liquid seeped from the pipe walls, dripping into the murky sewage. Light appeared ahead. Gord knew he was nearing the entrance. He quickened his pace. The slippery, filthy environment made him constantly uncomfortable. Reaching the entrance, Gord carefully climbed, trying to avoid getting the unknown liquid clinging to his clothes. Just as he was about to leave the sewer, he seemed to vaguely hear a strange noise coming from behind, like the cry of some animal. Gord instinctively looked back. In the boundless darkness of the sewer, 2 eerie red spots had appeared. Deep red. Like a pair of eyes staring at him. A chill ran down Gord's spine. He dared not look back and quickly slipped out of the sewer through the opening. Gord returned to the general store and informed Pierre that he had finished cleaning up the worms. He returned the unused insecticide to Pierre and received his meager reward, 2 silver clover coins. "I'll bring you the ring tomorrow. I'm heading back now, I smell bad." Having received his payment, Gata took his leave decisively. Even with his utmost care in the sewers, even using his mage's hand to clean himself, he was still inevitably stained with filth and needed to wash quickly. Back at the herb garden, Gata first took a shower to wash away the stench before heading to the dining hall for dinner. Given night assassin Yelan's glorious record, the other apprentices in the herb garden, except for his roommate Amy, kept their distance from him. Just now, as Gata sat down at the table with his food, the other apprentices instinctively quickened their eating to leave the dining hall quickly and avoid sharing a room with him. Gata didn't care. He leisurely finished his dinner, cleaned up the dishes, and headed to his workshop. 2 major projects awaited him tonight. In his workspace, Gata sat cross-legged, concentrating his mind. Wind Spirit Moon Shadow, he silently chanted, and the simple yet familiar interface reappeared. In the spell bar, besides Repair Plus, the other 4 spells had small yellow plus signs flashing. Gata pondered for a moment, finally focusing his gaze on Acid Splash. In terms of damage, Acid Splash surpasses Frost Ray. This time, his skill point allocation would be a choice between Acid Splash and Frost Ray, both powerful spells. In professional terms, given the current disadvantage, his limited resources should be used to buy damage-dealing equipment, only then would he have a chance to turn the tide. Skill point: without hesitation, Gata stared intently at the plus sign after Acid Splash. The next instant, the Big Dipper, representing the origin of the dark swamp worms, emerged from within Wind Spirit Moon Shadow, merging into the Acid Splash spell model like lightning. The 2 elements merged seamlessly, and new branches sprouted and extended outwards from the original Acid Splash spell model. In an instant, the Acid Splash spell model, initially composed of 9 stars, expanded into a new model with a full 18 stars. In the spell bar, the plus sign after Acid Splash disappeared, and its name changed to Acid Splash Plus. Acid Splash Plus, Conjuration, 0 level, launches a small acid ball at the target, with an initial maximum range of 25 feet, approximately 8.5 meters. You must make a successful ranged contact attack to hit the target. The acid ball deals strong acid damage. The acid from the acid ball disappears after a few seconds. Bonus: the acid can be retained for up to 1 day as needed. It's done, Gata thought with joy. The change in Acid Splash Plus did not disappoint him. The acid from the acid ball itself is damage over time. As long as the acid exists, it will continue to deal damage until it is depleted. However, most of the time, The duration of the acid's duration expires before the acid released by acid splash is completely consumed. Therefore, the increased retention time of the acid is equivalent to an increase in its destructive power. Moreover, the significance of retaining the acid for at most 1 day is not just increased destructive power, but also has strategic value, expanding the uses of the spell. For example, Gada's current thought is that since the acid can only be retained for a maximum of 1 day, he can store the acid splash plus acid a day in advance. When needed, he can indirectly cast the acid splash spell through physical throwing, thereby breaking through his mana limitations. Points added complete. Gada took a deep breath, calmed his fluctuating emotions, and began the second major project of the night. He rummaged in his pocket and pulled out a ring. A damaged divine ring. Let's try it. Gada concentrated his mind, mobilized his mana, and controlled the mana to flash through the Repair Plus spell model. The mana transformed into invisible energy streams, gathering in his fingers, converging into soft light, gradually enveloping the damaged divine ring. The glimmer of light precisely penetrated the cracks in the ring, flowing along them like molten metal flowing into a mold, rapidly filling and healing every inch of damage. Normally, this would be the end. The repair spell's function is limited to this, it only repairs physical damage. But what Gada now possessed wasn't just repair, but repair plus, therefore, the repair continued. The runes representing the source of the ring's magical power were now enveloped in the soft light of the repair spell. A golden line began to extend from the broken edge of the rune, reaching its original point of connection. It was as if an invisible quill pen, dipped in golden ink, was sketching along the broken rune. As the last ray of light merged into the ring, the surface of the divine ring once again shone with its original luster. The lost magical power also revived. Gada breathed a slight sigh of relief. The mana consumed by casting Repair Plus was equivalent to casting 3 normal level 0 spells. But the completion of the ring's repair proved that every effort had its reward. He put the restored divine guidance ring back on his finger, focused his mental energy on the ring, and immediately received relevant information. With the help of the divine guidance ring, he could cast the spell, Divine Guidance, once a day without cost. Divine Guidance, Prophecy, 0 ring. Select a target to cast this spell, temporarily and slightly increasing their performance in the next skill. This includes, but is not limited to, lockpicking success rate, archery accuracy, and item crafting success rate. Chapter 24 Making Money is Hard. There's such a spell. Gada already had some understanding of spells, knowing that they could have all sorts of amazing effects, with astonishing destructive power and lethality being just one part of them. But he hadn't expected that the effects of spells could be so widespread as to improve one's skills. Divine Guidance, Gada secretly took note. If he could escape his current predicament, he would definitely try to obtain the recipe for Divine Guidance in the future. Without a doubt, Divine Guidance was an essential spell for all extraordinary craftsmen, such as potion makers and alchemists. As for now, he should focus on making money. With the 2 major projects completed, Gada continued to sit cross-legged and begin his cultivation for the day. He knew, of course, that both the cultivation of guidance techniques and meditation techniques required time to accumulate, and there was absolutely no possibility of a major breakthrough in a short period of time. At least, there wouldn't be any breakthrough before the next drug trial. And if he failed to resist the Mage Seta by then his current cultivation would just be a waste of time. And this was a high-probability event. So, was his current effort unnecessary? But Gada understood even more clearly that no matter what, it was not a reason to slack off in his cultivation. For anyone aspiring to become a powerful mage, cultivation cannot be neglected, it requires astonishing perseverance. Yet, for every mage, it is the most fundamental thing. Gradually, Gada emptied his mind, focused his spirit, and immersed himself in the guiding spell. Silently, the abundant magical energy permeating the world flowed into Gada's body under the guidance of his spiritual power, and was gradually refined into mana. Although casting spells consumes mana, controlling the casting of spells also requires the participation of spiritual power. Therefore, due to using the Repair Spell Plus to repair the Divine Guiding Ring, Gada's spiritual power was not at its peak when he began cultivating. In less than 2 hours, his spiritual power depletion reached a critical value of 40%, and the efficiency of guiding magical power began to decline rapidly. Gada decisively interrupted the cultivation of the guiding spell and switched to the apprentice meditation technique. Only when the 40% of his consumed spiritual power had been fully restored under the effect of the meditation technique did his cultivation for the day officially end. Looking at the time, it was already close to midnight. The sixth lotus petal is almost manifesting. Compared to my predecessor, the speed of my guiding technique training hasn't changed much, but the speed of my meditation technique training seems to have increased significantly. Is it because of the soul transfer? God pondered to himself. The talent for guiding technique training depends on physique, on the affinity between the body and magic. The talent for meditation technique training, however, depends on the soul, and my soul talent is stronger than my predecessors. That's most likely the case. But whatever the reason, the increased speed of meditation technique training is always a good thing. Time to rest, God said contentedly, dragging his tired body out of the workshop and back to his room to rest. The next day. Awakening month, day 14. Afternoon. God finished preparing today's batch of basic spider venom potions. And his work for the day was finished. However, there was still an extra task, originally Elon's job. The potions in the herb garden had accumulated a certain amount, and it was time to send them to Phil's potion shop. It just so happened that God was going to the city today anyway to return the repaired divine guiding ring. He checked the types and quantities of the potions to be sent. 10 sets of basic stamina potions. These were concocted by the Mage Seda. He was the only one in the entire herb garden capable of concocting basic stamina potions. 13 sets of basic spider venom potions. These were the fruits of God's labor, and one set belonged to him. God's current daily workload was to concoct one set, 3 small bottles, of basic spider venom potion. With his skill, each set of basic spider venom potion yielded an extra half an ounce. Since a small bottle of basic spider venom potion contained 2 ounces, God could produce an extra small bottle of basic spider venom potion every 4 days. 12 days had passed since his last shipment, and he had accumulated exactly 1 set of basic spider venom potion for himself. God left the herb garden again, heading to the city's commercial district. By the time he arrived at Phil's potion shop, a fine layer of sweat had appeared on God's forehead. This time, Amy was not with him. All the potion loads fell on his own shoulders. Carrying over 20 stacks of potions on his back, each potion alone weighing a pint, 1.8 liters, plus the weight of the potion bottles themselves, was a considerable burden for Gouda, who was only 13 years old and whose body was still developing due to malnutrition. As before, it was a cash-on-delivery transaction. The purchase price for a single stack of basic spider venom potions was 2 gold, while a single stack of basic stamina potions was 2 gold and 5 silver, a difference even among basic potions. And that wasn't all. Basic healing potions could even fetch 3 gold per stack. This was because healing potions were always the most versatile of all basic potions, with no shortage of buyers. However, the recipes for healing potions were also the most precious, possessed only by a few established powers, and rarely sold. They were highly sought-after recipes, often heirlooms. The 22 stacks of potions were exchanged for a purchase order worth 46 gold and 10 silver. It seemed like a lot, but the actual profit was far less. I don't know about other things, but just considering basic spider venom potions, according to Gouda's observation, if all the raw materials needed to brew one batch were purchased from the apothecary, it would cost around 30 silver. That means, for a potion master, the actual profit for one batch of basic spider venom potions is only around 10 silver, and that's assuming a 100% success rate. If the potion master isn't skilled enough, even one failure while brewing a potion means incurring an additional 30 silver cost. After painstakingly learning a recipe and working for most of the day, the profit is only about 20% of the labor cost. Unless one masters a rare potion recipe like a healing potion, the profit a low-level potion master can earn is roughly this amount. Fortunately, Master Seda owns his own herb garden. Therefore, he can cultivate some of the herbs needed to brew potions himself, without having to buy them from the apothecary, thus increasing his profit. This is also common among most potion masters. They generally own their own herb garden, growing and cultivating herbs to reduce potion costs. Therefore, there's a saying among potion makers, a potion maker who doesn't study herbalism isn't a good potion maker. After stuffing the receipt into his pocket, God once again visited Pierre's general store with the remaining set of basic spider venom potion and the repaired divine ring. Really repaired, even though Pierre was somewhat prepared, he couldn't help but be surprised to see the divine ring perfectly intact. You'll see once you try it. God reluctantly handed the divine ring to Pierre. Pierre took the ring, put it on his right hand, and after carefully examining it, smiled with satisfaction. Your craftsmanship is truly excellent. If I hadn't known beforehand, I wouldn't even have been able to tell it had ever been damaged, Pierre praised. It's all right, God replied without modesty, but the truth will come out later, boss. You have a wide network of connections. Could you perhaps keep an eye out for people who need their magical items repaired and introduce them to someone? Of course, Pierre said with a smile. He naturally wouldn't refuse such a small favor. Moreover, acting as a middleman, even without taking a commission, just gaining favors from both sides is a win-win situation. The purchase price of the potion is the same as last time, unchanged. The repair fee for the divine ring will be as agreed. Pierre opened a drawer under the counter, took out several gold and silver coins, and handed them to God. A set of basic spider venom potion cost 33 silver, and the repair fee for the divine ring was 30 silver, totaling 63 silver. Looking at the 3 newly acquired Sean gold coins and 3 3-leaf silver coins, God's mood brightened considerably. Adding the remaining 35 silver in savings, his total savings reached 4 gold and 18 silver. Chapter 25 O'Kenley. Hogan City, City Square. Hogan City's annual trading day is held in the middle of the Awakening month, specifically from the 14th to the 16th of the Awakening month, a total of 3 days. Today is the first day of trading. After leaving Pierre's general store, Gata immediately rushed here with all his savings. The city square is vast, a wide expanse of blue brick, now crowded with people. These people include commoners, small vendors, impoverished family scions, and servants of noble lords. Now, these people of different backgrounds, like merchants, have set up stalls around the city square. The things they sell are incredibly diverse. Gata even saw someone selling a few oddly shaped stones picked up from the riverbank. Every now and then, 1 or 2 people would stop to look at the various stalls or ask a few questions, but very few transactions were made on the spot. Seeing this, Gata couldn't help but take a deep breath. His purpose in coming here was singular, to find bargains. To improve his strength, besides enhancing himself, using external resources was also a method. However, Gata's current savings didn't support purchasing external resources that could strengthen him through legitimate channels. He could only rely on the hope of finding a bargain. Of course, in a small place like Hogan City, without certain channels and influence, it was highly unlikely that even with the money, he could buy any magical artifacts. Unlike big cities, magical alchemical artifacts were extremely rare in Hogan City. Thinking this, Gata continued walking, already arriving in the middle of the plaza. The sky was already somewhat dark, but the magic crystal lamps set up in the plaza were now lit, brightly illuminating the area. Moreover, as the magic crystal lamps lit up, the number of people in the plaza began to increase. Even the number of stall vendors increased slightly, presumably city employees who had just finished get off work. Like the others, Gata walked slowly along the plaza, looking at each stall one by one, trying to find some good treasures. Among the many people in the square, he was definitely not the first, nor the only one, to have this thought. It was obvious, however, that finding a bargain did exist, and there were certainly stories of ordinary people making a fortune by finding something extraordinary at a street stall. But the prerequisite was sufficient luck and a keen eye. Most people generally came away empty-handed. And Gata didn't have that kind of luck. He wandered around many stalls but still didn't see anything suspicious, mostly just everyday items like pottery jars and iron swords. Until a stall surrounded by a dozen or so people caught his attention. After wandering around for so long, this was the first time Gata had seen such a bustling stall. What good stuff was being sold? Gata couldn't help but join the crowd. The stall owner was a young man, wearing a slightly worn but still finely made robe, though the once intricate and beautiful patterns on the robe were now faded and blurred. He was most likely from a small, declining family. Gata made this judgment immediately, then his gaze swept over the goods displayed on the young man's stall. Some exquisitely crafted ornaments, a few old books, and some worn-out trinkets bearing the marks of time. What drew the crowd was a strange, rusty, ivory-like bronze object. 10 gold coins, not a penny less, the young stall owner shouted. He picked up the ivory-like bronze object and pointed to the mark in the upper right corner, saying, "See this mark? That's the mark of the O'Kenley Merchant Guild." Gata had never heard of the O'Kenley Merchant Guild, but his gaze still instinctively fell on the mark. It was a six-pointed star, with a mysterious hieroglyphic symbol in the center. However, like the patterns on the young stall owner's robe, it was blurred and indistinct due to the wear and tear of time. Do you know the O'Kenley Merchant Guild? The most famous magical alchemy and crafting guild on the entire continent. Their magical alchemy products sell like hotcakes, always in high demand. Without connections, even money can't buy them, the young stall owner continued to boast. The fact that my treasure bears this mark is enough to prove it's a magical alchemy creation of the O'Kenley Merchant Guild. The young stall owner's confident assertion about magical alchemy creations attracted even more attention. Mages are synonymous with power, and anything related to magic is undoubtedly a treasure, mysterious and powerful. How could it not attract attention? The one who took a liking to this bronze item was a middle-aged, overweight man. He wasn't fooled by the young stall owner's words, leisurely interrupting the young man's boasting. First of all, this mark is already blurred and indistinct. In its current state, there's no way to prove that it's definitely the mark of the O'Kenley Merchant Guild. Secondly, even if it is the mark of the O'Kenley Merchant Guild, it doesn't prove anything. There are plenty of unscrupulous merchants across the continent who forge their marks. In a place like Hogan City, the possibility of a product from the O'Kenley Merchant Guild appearing is very low. Anyway, I don't believe it. Finally, the middle-aged fat man curled his lip. This thing can't be called a magical alchemical creation. It clearly doesn't have any magical fluctuations anymore. Either it's damaged, causing the magical power to leak out, or it wasn't a magical item to begin with. The young stall owner wasn't embarrassed by his boast being exposed by the middle-aged fat man, still arguing confidently, it's just that its magical power has leaked out, but it is still an extraordinary magical item. If you just take it to a big city, find a repair craftsman to fix it, and resell it, selling it for 60 or 70 Sean gold coins will definitely not be a problem. I wouldn't be selling this if it weren't for an emergency. The middle-aged man, clearly knowledgeable, pointed to the markings on the bronze object and said, "Kid, don't think I'm clueless. Judging by the wear and tear, it's been damaged for at least 20 years. Whether it can be repaired is uncertain. Even if it can be repaired, the repair cost for this level of wear will definitely be high, and it's also unknown how much power it will regain after repair. If I bought it at a high price, and then travel all the way to a big city to find a skilled repairman to gamble on a perfect restoration, do you think I'm a sucker? If there's such a cheap deal, why don't you do it yourself?" the fat man said with a smirk, his tone seemingly sarcastic. The surrounding crowd laughed heartily. The young stall owner blushed. "Then how much do you think you're offering?" 2 Sean gold coins. The fat man held up 2 fingers. "How is that possible? The material alone is worth 2 Sean gold coins." The young stall owner protested. "That was when it was first made. Now it's worn down like this, so the materials aren't worth much anymore," the fat man said truthfully. "I'm not selling. If you want to get a bargain, go somewhere else. You're not welcome here." The young stall owner, already bullied by the fat man and now subjected to such a steep price cut, was simply too hot-tempered and started trying to drive the customer away. "Young people are so hot-blooded," the fat man said calmly, smiling with narrowed eyes. "It's all right, I'll leave. You can see if any sucker is willing to pay this price. I'll be back on the last day. If you still haven't sold it and have changed your mind by then, my price will still stand. Even if it rots in my hands, I won't sell it to you," the young stall owner retorted angrily. The fat man shook his head, chuckled, and left. Once the excitement subsided, the crowd gradually dispersed. To be honest, the items on the young stall owner's stall weren't particularly attractive. Without any excitement to see, people naturally lost interest in lingering. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.